gals, won't you come out tonight and kiss under the moon? It's funny now, Mr. Blake, that after last year's episode, I didn't realize after we had our little Christmas party together, I come out, my reindeer had been towed. I'm stuck. I had to go. It was terrible. It took me like 4 hours to get home in the snow because I had to go to like Brooklyn because they towed the reindeer to Brooklyn. And then I had to get all these kind of things. They quarantine them and all this kind of stuff. All this stuff happened. So I had you come over my little apartment tonight. And I feel remiss if I don't mention just the lack of last year of, we had a piano, you were singing, you had a fire, you had music on in the background.
You know, I also noticed that nobody cared. Nobody cared that we did that. I think one person commented on the fact that we had a weird holiday party last year.
Well, I was decorating the Christmas tree as one does if you're a Christian in this time of the year. And you put on YouTube, and then sometimes you put on stuff that you won't normally watch. You might watch like an Andy Williams special or whatever, in the background. Dean Martin. I've been watching a lot of Dean Martin Christmas specials, Bob Hope Christmas specials. And the Bing and Frank thing came up. And every time I watch the Bing and Frank thing, which I've seen multiple times, it's about half hour, 45 minutes. I automatically think it's like you and I. And I think that was the impetus. It made me instantly think of our last year Christmas episode. Yeah. And I was like, this is the reason why, because when I would watch that years prior, I thought like Blake and I could be doing this. I come over, I'm Bing, you're Frank, or vice versa. And we're just like, so that was the whole impetus, everybody, for us on the Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers podcast, Christmas 2024, was just to make it like an old festive holiday special that you remember and love. What did we do last year?
Schwarzenegger?
Jingle All the Way.
Jingle All the Way.
Yeah, Jingle All the Way. Maybe it wasn't the best movie.
This year would have been a better movie to do that with.
Yeah, see, great minds. Now it's always we're armed. What is it? Monday morning quarterback. We should have held that in that back pocket.
For everybody who is just tuning in, obviously today we're covering the absolute holiday classic, "It's a Wonderful Life" from 1946. But just minutes ago, before we started recording.
You're really going to let the cat out of the bag, literally?
Dion and I had a 20-minute conversation about the pornography industry in New York in the 70s.
Yes.
So you missed that show, unfortunately. It was fascinating. So now we're taking a 90-degree.
We're doing. That's the joke from Last Action Hero. We're doing 360. No, not 360, because if you do 360, you're back where you started. We're doing a 180.
Doing a complete 180, and now we're covering one of the most beloved movies of all time.
Yeah, so we go from the 70s porn industry in New York City, to one of the most beloved Christmas episodes or movies ever. So we're back once again to close out the 2025 season of Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers. So far we've been doing all 80s movies.
Yeah.
And then I said, let's do the penultimate 80s movie, It's a Wonderful Life.
Chop 40 years off.
Yeah, which you can kind of tie to the 80s. If I want to try to like make this connection, I remember from a very young age, when I was still living in New Haven, so I was under age 7 when I was watching my little cabinet TV, the uproar about colorization. And I remember there was like Ted Turner was all involved in it. And I don't know if there was like Senate hearings or committee. People were getting mad because they realized they can colorize movies. So like you'd have like the Three Stooges shorts colorized. You'd have Little Rascals colorized. And I remember one of the first movies I remember seeing colorized was this movie, It's a Wonderful Life. And it was like the Hal Roach, like that Something Treasures edition. And I remember getting it like at a dollar store or I don't know, like an Odd Lot or an Odd Job back in the day, and bringing it home and watching it colorized as well. And it was always kind of like a little off. Yeah. It was like March of the Wooden Soldiers as well. It didn't look right. So that was a big thing in the 80s. Because
some of the colorized stuff now looks pretty good. I remember years ago, over 10 years ago, I bought a Three Stooges thing. I think because it was in 3D, but they were also colorized.
They did 3D Three Stooges?
Yeah, they took like a handful of shorts.
Is this because when you had your 3D television, or you still do when you during that little period?
Yeah, I
when
was
they
just
were
buying
having,
stuff on 3D. I was also teaching. I might have been teaching the class on comedy films at Purchase College, and I might have bought it for that. But there were colorized versions on there. You could watch it in black and white or colorized. And I checked out the colorized, and they were good. And then there was like a featurette about how they colorized it, and they would look for advertising.
Oh,
In the background, because then they could do research and figure out like, okay, that Coca-Cola sign or that Pepsi or that, whatever dish detergent box was this color. And then they could kind of,
that's the key.
Then they could gauge like, okay,
Everything.
this shade of gray might be, and then they would look for like clothing fabrics of the era and figure out like what were popular colors. It was really actually very interesting.
That's a whole podcast on itself we're diving into, because I remember, like certainly when they did a 2007 edition of this where they used computers to colorize it. And that might be the thing that's available now if an option to stream it, if you try to stream the movie. But I remember, what was it, like 5, 6, 7 years ago? Do you remember when I guess people were still watching network television? They did a premiere of like, I think I Love Lucy and an episode of, it might have been the 2 episodes of I Love Lucy, one with, what's his face? George Reeves as Superman or somebody as Superman. And then the episode with her eating chocolate where they colorized it for the anniversary. And it was like, they're using brand new computer technology. So it looks stupendous. It looked amazing. I remember that being a big thing. And then, what was the other thing I was going to say about colorization that you were saying? Because it blows my mind now. If you're looking at Instagram or something, you see these people who go colorize old photos or colorize maybe silent film footage of people walking around like Paris in the 1890s or early 1900s. And how good it looks. Yeah. And it's like, how the hell are they determining? I never understand a frame of reference when you see like a World War One. Did what's his face do that also for his Peter Jackson? He did a World War One movie. He might have colorized it. And he added sound effects. I forget the name of that darn thing. It came out like 3 or 4 years ago around Dunkirk, and it was very good. If I remember, I might be wrong, but I think he colorized some of that. But anyway, when you see these pictures of the Victorian era or like the 30s or 40s, and then you see them colorized, it looks stupendous. It looks amazing.
Yeah, I will easily go down a rabbit hole like on YouTube or something, watching old New York footage and being like, oh, that's, where is that? Try to figure out where it is. I'm like, oh, I know where that is. That's this street looking down towards the park, and then and a lot of that is colorized. Oh, and they add the sound effects and
it sounds like, and then people talking and, streetcars, trolley cars going by. The Peter Jackson thing's called They Shall Not Grow Old. It was from 2018 and he colorized it. And it's really good if people haven't seen it. Maybe because it was the 100th anniversary of the end of the war. 1917 it ended, so maybe they did it for that. But it was very well done. So anyway, I remember from a very young age, especially in the 80s, this being a big movie. It was on all the time. And it always, when we were talking about trying to do an episode for Christmas this year, and this came up, I was like, it is, I guess, one of my favorite movies in a weird way, but I never looked at it that way because I watch it every year. I know it, the majority of it by heart. I had a friend of mine in high school named Noel, who you've met, who's a mutual friend, a guitar player and stuff. And he had this huge affinity for Rocky in this movie. So he'd always throw Rocky quotes out to me that I didn't know because I don't know as much as you do. But he would do It's a Wonderful Life quotes. Why don't you stop annoying people? Like all these little. So I would always do like these little odd quotes with him. So it's always been in my back of my head. And then I'd say for like 10 years, I tried not to watch it because it was almost like Christmas Story. It was everywhere all the time. And I've kind of come back to it in the past couple of years. And I really enjoy it.
Well, my biggest memory of this movie is being in your house, I'm guessing in Hamden, and being in the bathroom, using the facilities and being like, There's like
We used to put you in there just to make you quiet, shut the light out for timeout.
in case when I got naughty.
Yeah, my mom would say, "Go in there."
I just remember there being like a poster for.
Yeah, we had it in the dining room.
There was a book in the bathroom about it. There's like all this stuff, and I was like, "What's the deal with all the It's a Wonderful Life stuff?" And you're like, "Well, when I was a kid, I didn't really know what to get my dad, and I know he liked that movie, so I would just buy him."
You're right. I was just about to say that. We got the poster at some point when we moved to Hamden, so that was like, in like middle school, high school. I got him that poster, which is like the iconic drawing where he's like holding her in the air. And then they framed it and they put it like we always had the Godfather, the family photo of the Godfather
which
wedding.
Is amazing.
Yeah, because
when you would walk into Dion's parents' dining room, like on the wall was a giant framed photograph of the wedding photo from the Godfather. And at first glance, like, oh, that's a nice like family wedding photo. And then you look and you're like, oh wait, that's the Corleone family.
But the only thing my dad used to always say is like, you notice what the difference is with that? It's Al Pacino isn't in the picture.
Yeah.
So like in the movie, Al Pacino's in the picture, but for whatever photo they took of it, he's not in that picture. And the reason why he was
taking the photo.
Yeah, Al was behind it like doosh, with the with the little flash bulb. But a lot of people who listen to us may not know that like I'm named after my uncle Dion, and Dion was my mom's brother who died on his 2 days before his 19th birthday. And then they buried him on his 19th birthday in 1977. So when they, sadly, when they emptied out his apartment, my mom took that. That was his, the Godfather poster. So they took it and they brought it to the house, and that always reminded them of him. But it was perfect because my dad is like the uber Italian. So we framed it and put it on the wall. And then when we moved to Hamden, we put it on the dining room wall. We wouldn't go into the dining room that much. And then so then in middle school or whenever I got my parents' It's a Wonderful Life poster, they put that in the dining room too, framed. So we had these two iconic pictures, and I always loved the style of the It's a Wonderful Life because of the drawing and stuff and how cool it looked. So like you said, so when I got into like middle school, high school, I didn't know what to get my parents. That's why I'd get them It's a Wonderful Life book, or my dad, basically, not my mom. And then like my dad would look at it once, like, oh, okay. And then my mom would just take some of the books and she'd put it in the bathroom for you to read, like that little magazine thing.
Yeah.
So we had all these really eclectic books in there because they were just like, they were gaining dust because they were just like coffee table books. So that's why we would have one of them in there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great poster.
Yeah. It's really cool. And it's, you see it a lot now. I mean, there's a couple posters that's iconic. Like Them by the Christmas Tree at the end when he's holding the child and Donna Reed's next to him. There's another one of just his face that's kind of a drawing. And then the other one I see now a lot is the one we're talking about where it's the drawing. Yeah. And it looks, I think it's of the era. I don't think it was done later. I think they did it at the time, but it really is a throwback to how those posters used to look back in the heyday of when they were making these kind of movies. So that's what I always loved about it, the stylization of it, before we had guys like, what's his name, who just passed away, doing all those iconic posters.
Oh, Drew Struzan.
Yeah. Before Struzan and before all these other people like, Fazetta and stuff, you have these guys drawing these posters and stuff, and some of that stuff, I have like art in my house. I have like, Warner Olin from Charlie Chan doing a DeSoto ad, because it's just something I like or whatever. We have, Telly Savalas from Kojak or whatever the hell framed, I always love those like Life magazine, since they're bigger, it was a bigger magazine. They had these beautiful ads and stuff. So you'd get like Lucille Ball, selling Chesterfields, or my wife and I liked the old radio show Suspense, and it was Roma Wine used to sponsor Suspense. So we used to collect the Roma Wine memorabilia that's still around that you can find.
Well, yeah, that, the advertising stuff and signage and all that's a huge collector's market. It's very cool, that kind of stuff for sure.
And that was also stuff like if you go up to like, say, Lake George and you go to some of those places that sell like all kind of vintage stuff, they'd have like there's a place, Bolton Landing, which is like a couple miles north of Lake George, after the Lone Bull breakfast place. They have this big barn that has all this antique stuff, and this whole room is filled of these vintage ads. and you can buy them $5-10 a piece, and you just scroll through, be like, sections on cars or celebrities or cigarettes or whatever, and you can go through and find some of this awesome advertising like Frank Sinatra or Ronald Reagan or whoever at the time was selling cigarettes or whatever, the Ajax or whatever. So I love all those ad stuff, especially people have saved them, cut them out, and now they're nice and frameable. So but veering back on the road, so this has always been kind of in the back of my mind, and I've always loved Jimmy Stewart, and I used to always say, I live inside of a Frank Capra world in my head. And another one of the movies that are close to both of our hearts that Frank Capra did was Arsenic and Old Lace.
Yeah.
From 42 or 43, and that kind of blew my mind. I think, were you over my dorm that night when we were like, I think we were just channel surfing, and there was like a party outside because I lived like, in like a single room in an apartment, on campus apartment, and we had the door open and people are partying in the next room and drinking and smoking or whatever the heck. And we're, back when we were smoking cigarettes. And I remember, I think we went by like PBS 13, and all of a sudden we see Peter Lorre and Cary Grant in this movie. We're like, what the hell is this? And I caught the tail end of it. And it was Arsenic and Old Lace.
I don't think I was there because I think I'm trying to think if.
Did I record it? Did I hit record maybe? Just record the last half hour?
Because I'm trying to think. I don't even think I had a cell phone at that point.
No, I don't think we had
but I think you told me about it. You're like, there's this movie. Because, we need to get to this movie, the movie we're covering today. But little inside baseball about Dion and Blake is we used to have a comedy routine that we would do in the car.
We, for the people who've listened for a lot of years, we might have brought this up before, for the astute listener.
And we would always joke that we could only go on the retirement home circuit.
Yeah, the convalescent home circuit.
With it, because it was a comedy routine that involved impressions, but they were all impressionable movie stars.
Yeah, it was like Peter Lorre, Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant, James Mason, and I feel like there's somebody else in there too, like driving a car, going somewhere and pissing each other off or whatever.
There was that. There was also
the Hitchcock at the craft services table.
There was also the routine about the original trying to make Dr. No, where they cast Cary Grant and Peter Lorre and James Mason and Hitchcock being at the craft service table. Yeah. That was,
or was maybe Hitchcock directing?
It was Hitchcock directing. Just let it roll.
And then they're like Peter Lorre's bitching at the craft services table to like James Mason or Vincent Price, and then Cary Grant's Bond, and Peter Lorre's on set as Dr. No, something like that.
Yeah. So
that happened at the diner one night. Remember, we were just laughing at the diner after,
So we would always do this thing where Peter Lorre was always angry. And we would do Cary Grant and Peter Lorre impressions. And then there was like, there's this movie that has them both in it.
And Raymond Massey, who's coincidentally was one of the people who was considered for Mr. Potter in this movie we're talking about tonight, but also is buried in Hamden, Connecticut.
Yeah.
He married a girl from Hamden, and they buried him in Beaverdale Cemetery, which is just so random. He's very famous, but he played the Boris Karloff character in that movie, and he also played Brigham Young in a pick about the Mormon start in Salt Lake City area.
I will never get over the fact that Boris Karloff played that character on Broadway and couldn't get out of the contract to go shoot the movie. And that's why Boris Karloff doesn't play the Boris Karloff character.
And also because I think the three ladies were from the play, and maybe somebody else, maybe the brother who yells charge, I don't think it was Cary Grant or Peter Lorre, but because they had loaned out already those cast members, they didn't want to lose Karloff as well and have the play sink.
Yeah, because I think Karloff was like the main top of the bill.
Yeah, so he couldn't do it. So that's why they made Raymond Massey look like Karloff in the movie, which I guess falls on deaf ears nowadays if you don't even understand the reference. Trying to explain this to people how funny it is, because then he's all messed up looking. This is something, if we ever cover the movie, which I'm sure we would at some point, where like it was because Peter Lorre was drunk that night. He'd gone to see Frankenstein.
He was a plastic surgeon.
Yeah, and he was a doctor who can fix faces and stuff. And the Raymond Massey character was a serial killer, and he was killing all around the country. So he had Peter Lorre with him. and he needed his face changed because he was wanted by the law. So the night Peter Lorre was going to do the surgery, he went to see Frankenstein, got hammered, came back, and then performed the plastic surgery while he was hammered. He made him look like Boris Karloff. So the whole joke in the movie, so I guess that's funnier because it's Boris Karloff playing him on Broadway. Everyone's like, you look like Boris Karloff, and it pisses him off because it reminds him of what Peter Lorre did. Anyway.
Yeah, well, it's a shame because only a couple hundred people got to see Boris Karloff play that part. And that's it. But,
and I think it was on the shelf for a year too. But I forgot why. They couldn't release it because they had to wait till the Broadway run was ended too or something. There's some other story to that too. But Capra did that movie. He did other iconic movies like, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and he did a couple others with Jimmy Stewart.
It Happened One Night with Clark Gable, which is a classic.
Classic.
Kind of.
And this was formative too for Jimmy Stewart because Jimmy Stewart, he was doing a lot of character roles like Shop Around the Corner, which is another movie near and dear to my heart. He's in one of the Thin Man movies. I think he might, spoiler alert, be the villain in one of the sequels at the end, they find out. But he was doing character roles in these various movies. And then he went to war, had a very active role in World War II. He was a combat pilot on like a B-17 or B-29. And if people have seen the Memphis Belle or these other movies, it's like, you were lucky if you were able to do like 10 successful missions. And I'm probably wrong because I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I think like if you did a tour, you have to do like 20 or so for your tour to be done or whatever. And he did like 24 or 29. He did an insane amount of flights flying over enemy territory, Germany and occupied Europe, dropping bombs and stuff like many of the people who, like everybody went to help out during World War II, either to actually fight or to help do, like Capra do the war films to help the government. So when he came back from the war, he was, he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. And, he was suffering at the time for PTSD, which they called either shell shock back then, or I think, flak flight or something like that because of the flak you'd get when you're flying those planes. So a lot of those guys came back messed up, like Lee Marvin say. That's why he was a drunk for the rest of his life, because of the atrocities. He's really the Cliff Booth, if people know Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you look at Cliff Booth in that movie, Brad Pitt, he's really just Lee Marvin, like all the action he saw in World War II. These guys were messed up, and some of them coped by drinking or whatever. Or various other things. But so Jimmy Stewart came back and he didn't know if he wanted to even act anymore. So he went back to Pennsylvania and he was thinking like, I have no like prospects or anything like that. His dad, I think, owned a hardware store maybe, or a general, like a haberdashery in Pennsylvania. So he was going to like start working there again until I think Capra called him and said, hey, I have a role for you might like. And this was the first movie he did post coming back from the war. And this helped him. This was very cathartic for him, helping him deal with the PTSD he was facing, like a lot of other guys at the time. And then there was a noticeable change in his acting till you get to like the 50s, where he's doing the Anthony Mann pictures, which I absolutely love, the Westerns, which redefined the Western in that area. They became more psychological, and you see like a darker kind of, I don't know, they did like 4 or 5 or 6 movies together. Him and Anthony Mann, the director of these various Westerns. And you see like he's more mature, grown up, and he's got a darker side to him. And that was all from the war. And this was the first movie he got coming back. And you could see some of that near the end of this movie where he's like kind of losing it and stuff. I always found him, I love Jimmy Stewart. He's a great, great actor. I've always had such an affinity for him.
Yeah. I mean, Jimmy Stewart's one of the great movie stars of all time. Also interesting, never billed as Jimmy, always billed as James. He's one of the few actors that like we never say like Mike Fox. Yeah. We always say Michael J. Fox.
Well, it's like Louis Prima or like Louis Armstrong, not Louis Armstrong or Louis Prima, you know.
But we always say Jimmy Stewart. You never say James Stewart.
And he's also a very funny comedian because, as some other listeners might know, I'm a huge, huge Jack Benny fan. And during the TV years when Jack Benny transitioned to television, the joke was he lived next door to Jimmy Stewart. So he was always bothering Jimmy Stewart and his real wife. He'd come over and have episodes where like he'd steal his Oscar, or he'd send the tax examiner over. They'd go out to dinner, and so he was actually quite a very funny guy. He could do comedies and stuff like that. Philadelphia Story is a great example of that too.
Well, that's one, as you know, is one of my favorite movies of all time. So
yeah. With him and Carrie against each other, or together, fantastic movie. So yeah, Jimmy's in this too, and it's good. Now, do you have a history with this movie? Do you remember seeing it, or growing up with your dad or whatever, or any kind of thing like it being on TV?
I know I saw it I saw it at least at one point, but I hadn't seen it in so long, and I think that most people who haven't seen it or haven't seen it in years will like not remember that like the bridge and the angel stuff comes so late into the movie.
Yeah.
As we were watching it, I was kind of remembering a lot of the key scenes, but I hadn't seen it since I was a kid, really. As I've said on the show, like I didn't really grow up watching too much Christmas stuff. I would watch some of the Christmas specials on TV, like Rudolph and Frosty, but even those was like, I didn't watch them every year. I was like, yeah, I saw that last year. My dad, whatever Christmas Day, when I would always spend like Christmas Eve with my mom, and then I would go to my dad's house for Christmas Day. And so Christmas night, they would always play the 50s Christmas Carol.
Oh, with Alice or Sims.
Yeah. And my dad,
I love
and that's
that
like
movie,
my dad's favorite. Everybody has their own favorite version of that movie. That was my dad's favorite.
So but he's correct in the sense where the majority I always hear, the majority of people love the album. My dad as well. And because of me, because of him, it's like that is the majority favorite of that era.
Yeah.
You don't get into the 80s and start talking about Albert Finney or George C. Scott.
Yeah.
Or Michael Caine even.
So we always watched that, or at least part of it, whenever we would come into it, when he would find it on television. But besides that, I don't really recall watching a lot of Christmas movies. I watch more Christmas movies in the last 10 years than probably anybody when you combine all the Hallmark movies I watch, than with just like the standard romantic comedies that are made for Christmas. And then just like every Christmas movie that comes out every year, I watch, no matter if it's like the one with The Rock from last year, the one where, from last year where Jack Black was a demon who then gets mistaken for Santa Claus, which I think was directed by one of the Farrelly brothers, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, many of them aren't great, but I watch them all now. But as a kid, I didn't kind of grow up with it. So I probably had watched this at some point on television, most likely on PBS, because I didn't have cable. And so a lot of the old movies I would watch with my mom, like The African Queen, I remember watching. And the funny thing is, like, forever, until I was like a teenager, I never realized that like The African Queen is not a black and white movie, because we had a black and white television when I was a kid. So that's how
was I just talking to you about that, where I was lamenting to somebody like when we were little and I was living in New Haven. You remember my freshman film? That TV we used in my freshman film was my parents' TV. It was like a little portable one that was in their bedroom. And downstairs we had the cabinet, the color, I don't know what it was, like in 16 or 19 inch, cabinet television. Upstairs, that was color. Upstairs they had the black and white. So on Saturday nights, I would watch like TJ Hooker, The Muppet Show. Sundays I would watch, Silver Spoons into Ripley's Believe It or Not into Knight Rider. And I have no memory of them being black and white, but it was a black and white set. But to me, I was watching it in color because it was, so it's insane to me to think that like it never occurred to me that I'm watching it on a black and white television.
There was a weird thing that young people who didn't have to deal with a black and white television will never understand. And I don't understand it either, which is, I think it's more when you have a frame of reference, than watching like an old movie. Like when you watched a black and white television as a kid and you're watching a contemporary show, in your mind somehow made it color when you watched it.
like the Love Boat or whatever I'd be watching up there. I have memories of sitting on their bed watching it because it was like, on there at my mom's like wardrobe. And I'd watch it and it was just, I'm playing with my little Muppet guys, and doing the Muppet Show or Ripley's Believe It or Not with Jack Palance. And it never occurred to me that these were that they were, it's just so odd. I mean, I have certain memories of like downstairs, I'd watch like Chips on the big TV, or I'd watch Dukes of Hazzard and Incredible Hulk, Magnum PI, those shows. But the other shows that I watched specifically, like Knight Rider and stuff, I'd watch upstairs, and it never occurred to me that they were. So it's just really weird thinking that. But
Yeah, so I don't have a history with this movie. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it this year with you. Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant, they were just like a particular kind of actor that I don't think is appreciated today. They were guys that could do anything, but they weren't like chameleons, like Gary Oldman or, Christian Bale or Tom Hardy or these guys who can do all these different characters, but they're
with accents.
Daniel Day-Lewis like transform into something. They were always Cary Grant and they were always Jimmy Stewart. John Wayne's the same way. They were always them, but they specifically Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart. Cary Grant's an even weirder example because they were so good at playing the everyman, but Cary Grant clearly wasn't the everyman. I mean, Cary Grant's like the most beautiful man who ever lived, but somehow he could play, little Archibald Leach could play Cary Grant in a movie. I mean, even Cary Grant was a creation. His name wasn't Cary Grant. That accent was not his real accent.
Yeah.
John Wayne's accent wasn't the way he really talked.
And that wasn't his name. He was Marion Morrison, I think was his real name. It's
They would create these characters to become actors to play characters in movies. Jimmy Stewart, I think, was probably the most authentic of all those guys, but he was a guy
like a Henry Fonda.
Yeah, Henry Fonda too. And I like Henry Fonda, but in my opinion, Jimmy Stewart is like light years beyond what Henry Fonda could do as an actor. Henry Fonda is great, and he had a type. And when you got into like Once Upon a Time in the West, and he was cast opposite that type, it was effective because he was so known for that. Grapes of Wrath, lovable character. But Jimmy Stewart could act his ass off, and but he was always Jimmy Stewart. He had that way that he talked, and you just liked him.
And he came off so naturally. Like a lot of his line delivery is almost like it's improvisational.
Yeah.
That's another line I always quote from this movie. He's like, how's that? He's like, he'll say that to somebody if he doesn't hear it right or something like that, or he'll stumble a little bit like, well, what, how's that? What did he say?
Yeah,
it always looked like his first take.
He's shockingly authentic, and everything seems like it's coming from him. It's not written, which is oddly a talent. When you get to like really stylized writer filmmakers like Kevin Smith or Quentin Tarantino, like there are very few actors that can deliver that kind of dialogue and make it seem natural. For Kevin Smith, Jason Lee is the only person ever that has ever been able to deliver Kevin Smith's dialogue and make it seem like it wasn't dialogue. But Jimmy Stewart was a guy who obviously he wasn't dealing with dialogue that wasn't as stylized as from the filmmakers of the 90s kind of on, who were all in that mold. But you're right. When he delivers a line, it sounds like natural speech. He didn't think about it. It wasn't a line that he had to learn. He's reacting in the moment, and that's just what comes out. His like stammer, I think, is part of it, and it's very charming and it works. But yeah, I mean, I love Jimmy Stewart. And so to get him to to do this movie, the first movie after World War II, where he gets to have such an interesting arc as a character. And it's an arc that, like when we did Rocky so many years ago, and I talked about how like, oh, I loved Rocky as a kid, but then when I saw Rocky when I was 30, it was like changed my life, like seeing that movie about that character, his plight was not something I could totally understand and relate to as like a 10-year-old or even a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old. But seeing it at 30 literally changed the way I looked at that movie and how much I love that movie. I think it's the same way with this character. I don't think as a kid you understand, you don't have the life experience to understand what is actually happening with him. Like kind of the tragedy of him, this guy who has so many big dreams, has plans, sometimes gets so close to being able to go and do those plans, but then just gets trapped by responsibility and morality, ethic, like just being a good guy, and not saying like, screw you, I'm gonna go and be me, wanting to help people, wanted to just be a good person and do the right thing. I don't think as a kid you could really get it until now when, we've all now as people in our mid to late 40s, Dion and I, having lived life and known what it's like to feel trapped by something, by work, by responsibility, by budget. So it was really fascinating to kind of watch it, not having seen it since I was probably way too little to remember most of it. Like I said, as we watched it, I would remember like, oh yeah, I remember this scene. And I remember the football outfit, after the pool. And I remember them falling into the pool. A lot of the stuff you probably just see in clips too. But watching the whole thing from start to finish and seeing this arc by this guy who, he's Luke Skywalker, he's like, I want to join the rebellion. You have enough droids to work on the evaporation farm or whatever, I want to go off. I want to do this. It's Jimmy Stewart is standing on the fucking hill looking at the two suns.
Well, luckily his aunt and his parents weren't killed by the freaking
Chloe and Beru.
Yeah.
But yeah,
although his dad is kind of killed by Mr. Potter in a way.
Yeah. But it's like that. Look, there's a reason why that character works in movies and why someone like George Lucas would make a character. Last Starfighter, when we did Last Starfighter, I talked about how that scene where he's sitting in the trailer, he's sitting in his trailer, his bedroom in the trailer park, and the main theme's playing as like a sweet piano theme, and he's listening to his neighbors outside, and he's mouthing the conversations they're having because he's heard them a million times through that window. But he's, he has a poster of someplace, and he's got the thing hanging on the ceiling with the stars and stuff, and he's just a guy that wants to get out of this trailer park and live his life. But like Jimmy Stewart in this movie, he's trapped in that life, and he gets to have his adventure. Luke Skywalker gets to have his adventure. Jimmy Stewart gets to have an adventure, but it's not, and it's probably more rewarding than the adventures those other guys have on a personal growth level. But he's a guy that instead of finding his adventure off in space or wherever, his lesson is that, like, hey, your life's not so fucking bad, man. Like, you got a great family, you got friends. Like, in a way, it's like that lesson is an important lesson to learn because most people don't get to have their adventure, to realize that, like, well, everything you really need and you really want is actually here.
Yeah. It's kind of like foresight. You don't realize until it's gone, say, or something, that you're like, oh, what I'm looking for, what is the forest for the trees or whatever, something like that. It's like, watching it this time. I mean, I didn't watch it last year because I caught a marathon on it like 2 years ago, maybe, and it was on like all day long on one of the channels, maybe TNT or USA. So I watched it on loop a couple years ago when it was on Christmas Day. So I didn't watch it last year, but watching it this night with you, I was starting to, I'm like just a real sissy now. And I was every like 10 minutes I was tearing up, like just different things hitting me, like, his reactions, or he'll step into this amazing close up and they realize, or this or that or something, or when his brother gets off the train, then he realizes, his brother's going to get a job at the plastic factory or whatever. And then he realizes his brother ain't going to take over for him, or or his father has the stroke, and God, something's going to happen, and this and that. It's just gut wrenching.
Yeah. The moments that I definitely got me teary were when he's a little kid in the pharmacy and his boss starts to hit him.
Well, Mr. Gower, starts beating him up.
And he said,
what's his face?
Yeah, like that really got me. Like I was, and then of course things that happened towards the end. But yeah.
And I always thought that kid. I never saw. I'm sure he's in other stuff. His name's Bobby Anderson, who plays the young George Bailey. I always thought he was a great little actor. And that scene's so intense. It was always almost scary for me when I was little. Like I didn't want to watch it. I wanted to like shut my eyes. And then during research on this, you find out that the what's his face at the time, the actor H.B. Warner was supposedly drunk at the time, according to Bobby Anderson, the child actor. And I guess everybody thought it was okay. It wasn't like
it was method.
Yeah, exactly. That was the method back then. Where I'm sure people were sauced in other roles, but for this role, he's hammered and he was really whacking him. And evidently that's real blood. He hits the kid a couple times, but I always found that so disturbing that like he almost, like even his look, Warner's look of being like gaunt and, because it really lends itself later on when he comes in as the hobo into Nick's restaurant. And what's his face? What's his name? Oh my gosh. Sheldon Leonard is yelling at him like, that's another thing. What are you doing in here? Like, I feel so sorry for Mr. Gower with all they throw a drink at him or something like that. So it just hits you so hard and him losing his hearing, or just with the run on the bank, or when he starts losing it when, what's his face? Thomas Mitchell almost loses when he loses the money. And he's like, and Jimmy Stewart realizes the implications and really starts losing it, and he's mean to everybody.
Yeah.
And how amazing Donna Reed is in this movie. I think she might have been one of my first crushes as well when I was little.
I was going to say, watching this movie today, I don't think I've had a bigger crush on any character we've covered on this show that I have on the character of Mary.
Yeah,
in this movie.
I think Donna Reed is so beautiful, just so absolutely stunning and gorgeous in every single possible way. And I remember also it was around the late 80s, early 90s on Nick at Night, they were replaying the Donna Reed show. So because I knew her from, It's a Wonderful Life, I'd watched the Donna Reed show, and I was just like, she was like always the ultimate for me, the wife I wanted to get. She was so perfect in every way, and she's just so adorable, and she's so great in this movie.
Yeah.
And it really was her first acting, her big role, starring role, and it really kind of made her a star, so to speak. To certainly in the 50s to get her own show, Donna Reed show, and stuff like that. But she's just so good in this movie, and she's just so gorgeous and just so awesome, and she's head over heels for him, and he kind of doesn't see it. And I'm kind of hitting your Hallmark movie bits here, where it's like,
well, I think, obviously I think of that, a lot of that resonates for me because I am such like a rom-com fan and a Hallmark fan and kind of just like general romantic in general. I think, she just, she's fantastic in this part. It's also a fantastically written part, both of them. So they're getting to work with really good material, which is clearly a benefit. But both Stewart and Donna Reed they step up to the challenge and are able to really do it. Yeah, clearly she's stuck in the friend zone,
I don't know why.
Like we all. Obviously we don't know why. because it's Donna Reed. But we
But it's
also
probably because Jimmy has other plans.
he
George
has
Bailey
plans.
wants to get out.
He's not going to be in Bedford Falls very long. He's got tunnel vision. He's looking forward. He's not looking around.
He doesn't want to get an anchor. It's like, what's his face? I'm a rebel, Dottie. I'm a loner. He's like, he's got plans. And then you clearly see in the scene when he goes to the prom, his brother's prom, and they lock eyes. She immediately and he's like, I don't want to dance with your sister. And then he sees her, and then it's funny. She's with Alfalfa. Yeah. And that's the joke where they start, he's like, can I finish? He's like, why don't you stop annoying people? And then they all start dancing. They start doing the Charleston. It's just like, and also a credit. It's like, she has such a strength in the movie too. I don't know if it's a maturity as a character or whatever, but she's very understanding. She's calm with him. She's trying to hold the family down. She's doing all that remodeling herself of the old house while he's at work every day, and the years clock by, and she's just really like the strength of the family with the kids and everything.
Well, that's definitely a challenge because, they gray his hair a little bit towards the end, but there is a huge, it goes from when he's a child, but even when we see them playing themselves, once that starts, where Jimmy Stewart's playing the character and Donna Reed's playing the character, there's a huge span of time.
Yeah, she's like 18 and he's like 21.
Yeah, and
then it goes to
till
38.
They're probably in their 30s, right? So
yeah,
so we see them across, and there's aside from a little bit of graying of his hair, which in black and white you might not even totally pick up on. As a viewer, they're not doing a lot with makeup. They have to play those characters mature, young at first, and see them mature over time into where they are at the end of the movie. And I just I don't know, man. It just works. This movie works. Capra is a filmmaker that still gets talked about for a reason. It's because he was great. He's part of that generation of filmmakers that there were so many that we don't talk about because they were churning out A movies, B movies, several a week. There were so many movies with the studio system, but we get the Howard Hawkses, the John Fords, the Frank Capras, we get the filmmakers that stand the test of time. And there's a reason for it. And it's because the movies he made were great. And he was a lot of the filmmakers that we still think of, that we still talk about from those days, were all tours, right?
Yeah, John Huston's, Orson Welles, or the
Hitchcocks. They had. You see a Frank Capra movie, you see a Hitchcock movie, you see a Ford movie. That they're the people that made it. They have a signature style, and that's those are the filmmakers in general that we still talk about. The ones that people latch on to, the ones that are people's favorite directors. Scorsese, horror is full of them, whether it's Cronenberg or Carpenter. Capra is definitely one of those guys, so much so that, at the time people would think it was, Capricorn. I thought his stuff was kind of corny. But that world that he creates, the one that you live in your head.
Yeah.
Is kind of the place that, we all want to.
The idealism, to
live in,
You want the world to kind of be like that cozy town in Westchester, Bedford Falls.
And it's not like a Hallmark movie, like a Hallmark movie. Like I always say about a Hallmark movie, it's like there's so little conflict in a Hallmark movie that you could barely call it a story. You know what I mean? And it's one of the things I like about it. I always say a Hallmark movie is like cotton candy. You don't even need to chew it. It's just you put it on your tongue and it's the most digestible thing ever. Capra movie has conflict, he's totally conflicted through this whole movie, and he's got obstacles, and there's antagonists, and there's turmoil, and there's heartbreak, and all these things. It's not like that. It's not like a Hallmark movie. At least in this movie, he's dealing, obviously Arsenic Lake is a totally different kind of movie. But in a movie like this, and some of the movies that he's most beloved for, Yeah, we see like the guy who wants to do the right thing, and he's pure of heart, and that's why we love Jimmy Stewart in this movie and the other movies, the characters in the other movies. But it's not without conflict. Like, and the reason why it works is because we understand, we feel for that conflict, and we wish we could overcome that conflict in life if we haven't, or we know what it's like, what you have to do to overcome that conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, when you get to that kind of place where he's on the bridge and he's like thinking of ending it all because everything's going wrong. It's that one, people always say, you're like one day away from having the really, really bad day, whatever that adage is. And they surround him with this amazing cast as well. You got Lionel Barrymore, who's great, playing Mr. Potter, who is interesting. Like you say, about the people who were just like a presence back then. I think of Lionel Barrymore, who I guess at some point in the 30s broke his hip. And because of that, he was permanently in a wheelchair. So that's the reason why in this movie he's in a wheelchair. But then you get him in Key Largo. To me, he's completely a different character in Key Largo, where, he's arguing with Edward G. Robinson. And he just seems like almost like a helpless old man in a wheelchair in that movie, how they present him, where he's not as imposing as Mr. Potter in this movie. It's a completely same guy. He looks the same, maybe they make him a little eviler here, how he squints. He kind of has the Ebenezer Scrooge thing going on. But versatile enough where I completely believe him in a wheelchair down in Key Largo with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, and then you have the great Ward Bond, who I love, who was John Wayne's best friend. He's in a hell of a lot of John Wayne and Ford pictures. Did the first couple seasons of Wagon Train before he ended up having a heart attack and dying. In here is Bert the Cop. You have Sheldon Leonard, who plays the bit part as Nick, the bartender who goes on to have a very sizable acting career as like a heavy, but then gets into producing, and in the 60s produces a lot of heavy stuff. Sheldon Leonard did I Spy and did a lot of other legendary shows at the time. He's in a very funny episode of what's the name of that show with Red Fox,
Sanford and Son.
Sanford and Son, yeah. When Sanford and Son, they go to Hawaii, and then they go shoot it on location, Hawaii. He's like the heavy that they encounter in Hawaii. But they just have Thomas Mitchell in this movie. No, they're great, as Uncle Billy. Fantastic in this movie. Just you believe he's the scatterbrain, and he's got to keep all these strings on his fingers to remember things. And I feel so bad for him when he loses the money and he's helpless, and I want to cry because it's like, he doesn't know honestly what he did with it or whatever. And he's such a lovable guy. He's got a crow, he's got all these other animals. He's got he's like the kind, innocent, simple man who's trying to live in this world and the pressure and do all, so there's just so many great ancillary characters in this that kind of bring it together. The what's his name, who plays Ernie as well, the cab driver, he's amazing in this too. There's just so many great people that are in this movie that are just Frank Phelan. It's just, if you watch enough of the movies of this era, you see these people because, they're just stock characters who were under contract. This was done with Liberty Pictures that Capra formed when he got out, and he got an 8-picture deal to do Liberty Pictures through RKO. And I think he only made two movies. And then because this movie didn't do very well, Liberty Pictures ended up dissolving. And this kind of, I guess, put a speed bump in Capra's career because people, since this didn't mildly flopped at the time, people thought like he kind of lost his touch, and I don't know if that affected him moving forward, but this is one of the only movies where he directed, produced, he co-wrote, he had some other input as well. I mean, he was all in on this movie. And it shows.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think what he does with this cast and the amount of characters, there's a lot of characters, and they're all well cast, like you were just saying, but he creates this world,
a lot of regulars for him too. He uses the same people
that we buy into, and it's these characters and these actors that sell it. It was, I think you could correct me if I'm wrong, but at that time, the largest set ever built for a movie, which was on the RKO Encino farm, is it called?
Yeah.
And so they built this whole town that was like city blocks long, all these store fronts and like a bank with an actual like marble front to it. So they created this world in Hollywood. I mean, this is movie magic, right? I mean, we talk about this all the time, especially when we get to the mid to late 80s with the special effects and how things were, technology and everything and imagination were at its peak to be able to do anything you want before CGI. And when we do something like Labyrinth with the puppetry, or when we did like Total Recall and talk about just like this world building thing with special effects. I mean, they couldn't do that, but to create this world during a record breaking heat wave in Southern California to make this winter in this small town that's built on a studio backlot essentially, and have this world populated by these actors that we totally buy as all these characters. I mean, that's where like movie magic really begins, right? We're whisked into like this small town of Bedford Falls during the winter. It's just amazing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, they ended up reappropriating a set, Cimarron, a movie from 1931. So I guess they had elements there, but he improved on it. Like you said, it was 3 city blocks. He put like a median kind of in the middle. He brought in a bunch of like I think oak trees. 20 oak trees he planted. He let like the animals roam free around it. It had a residential area, had a downtown area. Everything was functional in a sense with all the storefronts. I forget, like, maybe there's like 20 different stores or 75 stores and buildings and all that. And you got to think about it like when they go to Pottersville, they had to flip all that and put all like the neon signs up and make it all, jitterbug friendly or whatever, all these different things. It's just amazing.
It was the Encino Ranch, not the Encino Farm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The Encino Ranch. Which I think got hazed in the 50s. They knocked it all down. But this is back when they used to reappropriate stuff. Stuff would be like the house they move in and is from the Orson Welles movie, The Magnificent Ambrosons. Yeah. I can never say that name right. But they they use the exterior of that house. They shot the only 2 surviving things that they have is I think Beverly Hills High School is where they shot the scene with the pool opening over the gym. That's still there. And then the residential area, which when he builds like the Baileyville area and they have that new like suburban houses, that's still there. I forget where that is because they just found a development that was being built at the time and they shot it on location. Everything else is a studio set. And up until researching, for some reason, I read somewhere years ago that they shot the bridge scene up in upstate New York somewhere, which is not true. But I always believe, to me, it always looked like it was either New England or Westchester or something. It never once occurs to me that, like you said, they're in Southern California from May to July in a heat wave doing a winter Christmas movie or especially near the end scenes. They've got, half a foot of snow on the ground.
I wanted to ask you, when I was doing the research and you find out about the, RKO Encino Ranch, when you and I went to California, at one of the last days of our trip, we went to like the barbecue at that guy's house who collected Looney Tunes art. I remember that development where he lived. Somebody told us what used to be like the backlot for a studio. And I wonder if where his house was, I wonder if that was the RKO Ranch.
It could have been.
Before that.
He lived on like a cul-de-sac, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, I remember we're talking about, I don't know if he was telling us it. It was this older guy, and we went there because he collected animation art, and so we went to his house to check it out.
But it was an insane amount, like every inch of his wall space had priceless.
The only wall you saw were like the inch of wall between the frames.
All over even in the bathroom, every inch of his house, except for maybe the kitchen. Yeah, was just full of original cartoon art of every genre. Or was it original, or was it just Looney Tunes?
It was mostly Looney Tunes, is my recollection. Yeah.
Yeah. and he had like real cells and stuff of the era, framed, perfectly framed and all that stuff. He had people around just hanging out that just to make sure that you wouldn't touch or mess with a picture or whatever, because it was a sizable party. Yeah. That's where we met. What's her name? Ruth Gordon? Am I saying her name
it's
wrong?
Not Ruth Gordon, but yeah, she was
Ruth Gordon's what's her face, right?
Yeah.
From, yeah. Harold and Maude.
She's an actress, but
yeah, it's Ruth something.
Yeah, she was one of the few female animators during the day. So she was a pioneering animator, but she was a female, so it was a big deal because obviously women didn't get that. A lot of women didn't get that kind of work back then. Yeah, but I remember, I think it was the guy who owned the house was telling us that it was at one point it was an old studio backlot that they had kind of demolished and built housing developments in. So I wonder if like that's where we could have been standing in Bedford Falls when we were there.
Well, it's weird because I've done a couple work trips where I've had to go to the Reagan Library, which is in Simi Valley, and go up the hill up there to the Reagan Library. And no, we went to the Reagan Library as well, didn't we, for the same trip?
You and I.
Yeah, so like all there, that's where the Spawn Ranch is or was from the actual Manson. And then all that, the backdrop of all those hills, that's where they would shoot all the cowboy movies, the early John Wayne movies of like the 30s. And like Little House on the Prairie and all that stuff. That was all shot around there, you know? So it's like always thinking like you never know. I mean, I guess it's quaint for people who live out there.
Well, it's why they chose that area, right?
Yeah.
Because when they decided like where we're going to have a film industry, because it was in New York. You know, Chaplin had a studio in New York. Keaton had a studio in New York.
New Jersey, yeah.
But the reason why they picked Southern California, the LA area, was because one, weather, two, that you could go not too far in any direction, and it could be like the Wild West, or it could be the mountains, or it could be this. You could have Captain Kirk fighting a Gorn.
Yeah, or the same place later on you'd have Dolph Lundgren fighting, you know, at the beginning of Masters of the Universe, or, you know, one of these weird movies, or and I guess it's like us living in New York City, we take it for granted that like every inch of it's photographed. Well, out there, you know, I'm a little more, I don't know, maybe because we live in New York. I'm a little more fascinated when I go out there and I look at stuff like, wow, like, you know, 60, 70 years ago, they were shooting this movie here, or this series, Gunsmoke, or like Little House on the Prairie was shot here.
Yeah.
Or,
well, I remember when on that same trip, you and I went to the Disney studio, and as we walked by the Mary Poppins soundstage, you're like, fucking Dick Van Dyke, and walked right here. This is where we're walking in the same
when we
steps.
went into the commissary, we ate at the commissary, the Burbank lot where everybody since when Walt built it, you know, he when he brought it over from the I forget the name of the damn Hyperion, he brought it over. That was where they did everything from maybe 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and forward, you know, all that history that was there, with the tanks and the studios. And we didn't really get did we get this? I don't know did we get to look into the big studio where they did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that had the water tank where
I don't think so. The only building we really
Pirates of the Caribbean
through was the old animation building.
I feel like we had a chance to like look in to a soundstage. I don't remember where. I remember like we went up to like where we went into like the building where they recorded, or they used to record a lot of the audio work. And then when they crossed the street, when they made the new one that looks like the wizard hat from Fantasia, we went, of course, into that in the Frank Wells building, you know. But studios, the you know, the sound stages themselves, I thought we peaked in. But it's amazing, you know, that all that history's there or whatever, and you walk into the commissary, you're eating there with all these people, like, you know.
I've been to most of the studio tours.
Yeah, you've done a lot of these, haven't you?
Yeah, and when you walk through Paramount, that was where RKO was originally. So they will be like, this is the building where like this part of the grounds this is where this building was an RKO building that still exists. And they'll be like, and you know, after RKO, then it was like Desi Lou took it over. And so like that window was Lucille Ball's like office. And you know, Star Trek, and they have a parking lot was where they would fill it with water. And that's where like the end of Star Trek 4 is. The studio lot stuff is cool, man. Like some of the tours are better than others, but it is crazy to walk around those lots and see because they all have plaques of like what movies were shot in
Yeah.
the stages, and you're like, holy shit! Like,
Yeah, in the early '90s when we took 2 trips down to Disney World in Florida, I remember like you do the backlot tours of, at the time it was called the MGM Studios. I don't know maybe it's called Hollywood Studios now. You'd be able to see like they had this is where the Golden Girls house is, or they have a lot of stuff set up that they shot, or the New York City street that they use in a lot of movies and commercials and stuff, or Dick Tracy, they shot some of that there, and then they'd have on the backlot like a lot of cars. You'd see like a Dick Tracy like police car, or you'd see
like that big Bulldog Cafe from
from Rocketeer.
Rocketeer.
Yeah, like stuff like that. But the older stuff, like you're saying, when you go to these places that have been around for like now almost 100 years, and you see that, wow, this is where they shot like Stagecoach, or
Maltese Falcon was shot here.
Yeah, that's mind blowing. So that for them to build this huge set and have all these to make it you don't even question that you're not on the East Coast, is pretty incredible. And then the technical innovation they did here too, where they were able to, I think that this is what they won the Academy Award for. They developed the was it the set designer? He developed this new method of snow with a kind of like foam or some sort of thing.
Yeah, apparently they originally would use snow. They would paint cornflakes white and drop cornflakes, but
like uncooked cornflakes or something.
Yeah, but it would be too crunchy or something to do dialogue. So they created new methods for snow for this scene. So to cover the entire town in snow, it was a combination of, in certain parts, 3,000 tons of shaved ice, 300 tons of gypsum, which I think is some kind of mineral, 300 tons of plaster, which is probably more of the background where they just sprayed plaster. And then their big innovation was they used 6,000 gallons of foamite, which is what's in fire extinguishers, but it was a special blend of foamite and soap and water. But I've also seen accounts online where they say it was foamite and sugar and soap and water. The sugar sounds like it would get messy to me, especially during a heat wave.
Yeah.
But this combination of using the material that's in a fire extinguisher in a combinations with soap and water, they created a blend that read as realistic as snow on camera. And so, yeah, I think that's why they got the Academy Award, was like this innovation that then was used for a long time as fake snow in movies.
And it's a lot safer than like when they were using asbestos on It's a Wonderful Light, on Wizard of Oz and stuff like that. They would just have asbestos raining down because it looked like snow, or stuff back then. By the late 40s, they were taking people's health into concern here for, like, we can't use lead paint on painting people's faces. We can't light people on fire because of makeup, and we need to use some other alternative for snow. And it worked, even though they're in this heat wave where they're like, sweating balls through some of this. So, I mean, I feel like by now that you would assume, right, for the most part, that people know the plot of it, because I mean, it's been done a lot.
I mean, I think they know the gist, but like I said, I mean, I think most people who haven't seen it since they were kids or haven't seen it at all think that, it's like when we watched When a Stranger Calls. And like,
have you trucked to children?
You hear the concept of that movie and you think that's the whole movie, but that's only like the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, that's the opening. That's like before the credits roll.
Yeah. Then you have a whole nother movie. You have a whole rest of a movie after that.
Yeah, where Charles Durning makes it his mission to have the guy reoffend.
To drive that man back to crime.
As I remember it. I mean, it's been 20 years or 25 years since I've watched it. And
also, we should do that. Maybe next Halloween we'll do that, because then there's also like that 15-minute long chase scene where like you swear to God you're going to see Charles Durning die of a heart attack on camera.
He's hauling ass running upstairs. It's like watching what's his name from Robert Conrad from or William Conrad, I'm sorry, from Cannon, where he's every scene we watched that late at night, my wife and I, and and it's like, Jesus, they're like, he's doing all his own stunts. Like maybe they told him that it was going to be a rehearsal, but a car comes at him. He's got to roll out of the way. He's running around, and he's a heavy guy, William Conrad. And you're like, wow, this guy, but he did it. And, it's pretty incredible. But yeah, Durning was like really going balls out. I mean, Durning again was in the war. He was in Battle of the Bulls. We talked about that when we did, what is it? Dark Night of the Scarecrow.
Yeah.
His story of being at the Malmedy massacre and stuff like that. But yeah, he was just really giving it his all.
But my point is, I think what most people think this movie is actually only like the last 20 minutes of this movie.
Oh, the whole revelation of like,
Like I think they think it's like A Christmas Carol, where like the bulk of the movie is like him going back and seeing what life would be like when he wasn't born. And that's like the whole movie. But in kind of an unorthodox style of filmmaking for today, Capra spends like an hour and a half plus on establishing what Jimmy Stewart's life is like for real before we see what it's like without him. And as we were watching it, I was kind of feeling like I'm loving this part of the movie. Like I'm afraid that when we get to that part of the movie, it's like I always say, like sometimes when I watch horror movies, especially in the 80s, like I'm sold. I don't need Freddy Krueger to show up. Like I just want to watch these kids be kids. I don't need the neon maniacs to show up and ruin everything.
You don't need that summer to end for Grease to go back to school.
Yeah. Like I just want to live in the moment with this teenage, melodrama. I don't need, like, I'm loving living with Jimmy Stewart in Bedford Falls. I don't need Clarence to come and show me what life would be like without Jimmy Stewart.
But Jimmy needed him.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like a movie would not be structured like that today.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the whole movie would be like, he'd be Scrooge going through the whole bulk of the movie. He learns his lesson at the end, and then we're, Merry Christmas to everyone, hallelujah.
Good night, Mrs. Calabash,
but that's not
wherever
it.
you are.
We go from childhood to, down and out, lost his $8,000 and he's going to kill himself so that I'm presuming his wife can collect the insurance money and save the business and everybody else involved.
And maybe get a little sentiment for herself, have a little nest egg there. But we take that journey with Clarence.
So in that sense, I don't know if people do know that. I mean, they know that part. They know the last 20, 25 minutes of the movie, but I don't know if people are really, unless it's their tradition for them to watch it. The people that don't know the movie, I feel like they don't know the first 2 hours and 45 minutes of this movie.
It basically starts off where it's like this night where they're everyone's praying, everyone's upset, and then there's so much prayer going on, it goes up to the heavens, and then the angels
everybody in town is praying.
Yes, everybody in town is praying, and then you realize it goes up top, and then there has to be some divine intervention, and they have to bring somebody over to send it down to try to interject themselves in the situation. So they bring over the angels watching, bring over an angel who hasn't yet become a full-fledged angel and gotten his wings. And then they're trying to then get him up to size or get him up to date of what's going on. So they're going to give him a backstory. And this is where then the bulk of the first and second act, the entire first and second act is basically, like you're saying, is the exposition of George Bailey's life up until this night where the movie starts. And we don't get to the back to that night until maybe the last 20, 25 minutes of the movie, which it goes rather dark quickly. And
it goes real dark. He kills a drifter.
Yeah, he kills a drifter and he sucks the last breath out, and he's like, "Look what you made me do. I didn't want to do this. You made me do this." And then he puts him in his trunk.
If you haven't seen it, it goes real dark.
Yeah, you haven't seen it in a long time. You don't remember that scene.
It's been cut out in abridged versions on streaming, so you might not actually see it.
No, but if you listen to the Lux radio version of the radio play, they fit that in the hour.
What? Look what you made me do!
Yeah, made me do this again. Marion, I did it again, Marion.
Why you make me do this for?
Yeah, Mary, I did it. I got him in the back of the jalopy in the rumble seat. I've done it. She's like, oh, George, you've done it again. Zuzu, go back to bed. We have to go out to Potter's Field and put somebody else in the ground. But you just, you get his backstory, and that's where you get to connect with George Bailey and get his story and his backstory and his life and what leads up to this.
And you get to fall in love with Mary too as a viewer.
Yeah, you get to fall in love with Donna Reed, and you get to see how nice everybody is in the town and how nice they are to him and his relation to everybody. The scene when there's the run on the bank and they take their honeymoon money because if you line this up, I'm thinking that the run on the bank happens when when the big crash happens, the depression kicks in 29. So maybe that's why all these runs on the banks is happening. So they're about to literally leave for their honeymoon. They're going to the train and they see there's a run on the bank. It's raining out. He goes and he stays there and he keeps the Bailey Savings and Loan open for the day so it won't go out of business. It's closed at 6 o'clock, $2 left. And then he realizes, where's Mary? And, he's missed his train. And then they bring him over. There's this beautiful scene where they go over to the house, this dilapidated house that she loves, that she's always dreamed of moving in and remodeling. And his friends are there. Bert and Ernie are there. And they're trying to help the scene. I mean, it's just so nice. They're there.
Oscar's there. Big Bird's hanging out.
Yeah, Big Bird. Grover's hanging out. And Oscar doesn't want to do anything. Oscar's like, I'm staying out here. But they put these pictures up and they have the fire going and they've made a bedroom all nice and neat with the shoes by the bed, and it's just so hokey and in the nicest sense of the world. These such great friends are out in the rain, the policemen, and then they got to get back to work. They're singing these songs and harmonizing for them to just set the mood. It's really nice.
Well, yeah, it's romantic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd do that for you, Blake. I'd stand out the rain and sing weird songs.
Well, I mean, I think it goes without saying that I would do that for you too, man. There's an aspect of this movie that I don't know if it's wise for us to go too far into, but I would feel weird about not talking about it. And it was kind of accentuated by the fact that I don't know, that wasn't this past week, but a couple of weeks ago, Joe Bob Briggs did his Christmas special for the Lost Drive-In. And every year for Christmas, they pick 5 charities that each represent a part of the original Christmas story of Jesus. And they raise money for these charities. And this year, the charities they chose to raise money for were all charities that are important charities that lost funding because of the government. And it was, children and pregnant women with AIDS lost grants. 10,000 children and 10,000 pregnant women were kind of screwed because of their grants were canceled. This organization that tries to save endangered species lost funding because they were trying to lower the use of pesticides. The Women's Advocacy Center lost funding for shelters for women who are in violent situations. I mean, fucking Meals on Wheels lost is in total limbo because they don't know what's going to happen with their funding. I mean, all these places, for whatever reason, are not being helped anymore. And I feel like that's a big part of what's going on in this movie and why I think it will resonate for a lot of people today. I mean, the scene where George is kind of, before he's going to go off to college, And he's signing with the board members of the loan savings and loan.
Oh, after his father has the stroke and dies.
Yeah.
And he's missed his trip. He had a trip he was going to go on a 3-month tour of Europe, but he misses the trip to try to settle after his dad suddenly passes. And he's on his way to college now, you know.
And Potter, who's the antagonist, the rich guy in town who owns these slums, and of course he wants to continue to get rent money from the people who live there. Basically wants to keep these people down so that he can collect money. He wants to close the savings and loans, and he makes this argument for George Bailey's friend, who's Ernie, the taxi driver. Like, well, this guy got rejected from getting a loan at the bank, and why are we building him a house for $5,000? And he gives this argument of like,
our friends get just because we shoot pool with a guy.
If you shoot pool with some employee here, you can come and borrow money.
Yeah.
What does that get us? A discontented, lazy rabble instead of thrifty working class, which we hear all the time when people want to they want to kick people off of unemployment. Like if we hand out money, if we help people, they're going to get lazy. And then what does that get us in the end? And Jimmy Stewart, he steps up and he says, maybe my dad wasn't a good businessman, but he helped people out. And if people have homes and they're happy, like, doesn't that make them better citizens? Doesn't that, make them better customers? This town, the majority of the people in this town are the people, they live here, they die here, they work here, they spend money here. And in a world where we have like the greatest wealth inequality of all time. I mean, I feel like it's yes, we get the message that if you were never born, all the lives that you touched directly and indirectly, quantum leap style throughout history. But what we get here is he's like, yeah, my father, he wasn't a good businessman, but he saw these people as people and you see them as cattle. And it just made me think of like the way Joe Bob broke this down a couple of weeks ago was so beautiful and eloquent. And because he's out there and he talks to what they call the mutant family, which is the people that love horror movies, the people that love Joe Bob. And as Dion knows, I've loved Joe Bob since I was 19. And Joe Bob quotes Grapes of Wrath. Ma Job says in Grapes of Wrath, if you're in trouble or hurt or in need, go to poor people. They're the only ones that'll help. The only ones. And I think that's true. And I think that's a message that like comes through in this movie. Like George is not a rich guy. His dad was not a rich guy. George says this off. He's like, my dad, he didn't care about himself. Like he didn't even save money to send me and my brother to college. What he cared about was like handing people of this town an opportunity to better their lives and get out of the slums. So I just feel like we get the message at the end of the movie, which is like the impact that you make in a personal level change, is important. But the other big message is this movie is like, help out people, like help out your fellow man, like we live in this world where like fucking old people are not going to be able to eat because our tax dollars are not going to help the people that live here. We have a government that's like aligning itself with the Potters of the world because they think that that's going to help everybody else. But Capra's saying it in this movie, like we need to help, be a good person and help people. And I think it just like that message like really rang out to me watching it. as an adult, this time of my life, during this time of, in history, not just American history, these are messages that are still important. Help your fellow man. I mean, it's what like the whole Christ story is about. And, it's like all religion is kind of like about that. And I think like Capra told that story and that message like beautifully in this movie. And I think it's important. I mean, that scene in particular is just like all about that. Like, and it's stuff that we hear all the time in the news today. But Capra like sums it up in that scene. And then what happens when George Bailey's in trouble at the end? Mary goes out, leaves her 4 children at home alone.
With the bank examiner, probably.
Christmas Eve with 4 strange men. One of the kids is sick.
In the snowstorm.
It was a different time.
Yeah.
But the entire town comes to help them. When you're in trouble, when you're in need, when you're hurt, who's going to help you? It's the poor people. And like fucking Mr. Martini shows up. The entire town shows up to help George Bailey. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful message. And sure, like that's the Capricorn part of it. Like the whole town's not going to show up at your apartment and, hand over cash.
Yeah, I'm afraid in this world, the cynical world, no one's going to help you. I mean, your friends will.
Yeah.
But in this world where now we live in such a disassociated world where, we grew up in an era where, you go hang out at your neighbor's house or have block parties. I don't know if people still kind of do that, where people.
Yeah, but I find, Dion, you know what part of town I live in. I mean, there's a lot of homeless people. There's a lot of crazy people, but
I see it every day. Don't worry.
I haven't worked, in over 2 years. I haven't had a paycheck. I don't even know if I'm going to make rent, January 1st. I mean, it's really bleak. But when I walk by and I see somebody, or I'm on a train and there's, some immigrant woman with a baby strapped to her back and she's trying to sell candy. I don't take the candy, but I'll give her $1. Like I'm not in any position to be able to afford to help people. But I mean, it's like our duty as a community. And I don't mean like the city or like your personal community. Yes, it's that, but it's like the community of the world. And like, no matter how, obviously there's people that are really their lives are down to like there's nothing below that. But for the majority of us, we're lucky enough that even though our standing financially or whatever is pretty bad, there are people that are having it much tougher than us. And so like I'll reach into my pocket whatever I can, like I think it's important, that like I'm like I was living George Bailey before George Bailey. Like, doesn't this make them better citizens? Does it make this better? Like, I just felt like this movie, that's a big message that I think we lose kind of like when we think of this movie because of the important message at the end of the movie. But there's this big message of like, it's not just the Christmas spirit, but it's like, there's always someone who's got it tougher than you, and the poor people will always help the people that are poorer than them. And it's the Potters of the world that are the ones that don't seem to help as many people as they can. And so it's another reason why it made me really kind of love this movie when we watched it today, because it just really hit home for me.
Yeah, it's in a world where we have like BlackRock and these huge companies that are like buying, entire residential neighborhoods, to just now be a permanent renting class and all that. It's like what Potter wants to do when Bedford Falls turned it into this Pottersville and, turn everything into his own thing. And, you can relate to some of that today with some of the things going on,
And and look, I'm sure, I think one of the reasons why people are still talking about this movie today, since it began, because like every era finds its reflection in this movie. So I mean, it's not unique to today, but it's a movie that like clearly
resonates.
Yeah, it resonates and has always resonated, and now
The password is resonate.
and it still does.
Sure.
Like we haven't learned yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're never going to learn. It's only going to get worse, Blake. He's got to face the truth. It's only going to get worse. Yeah, especially like you're saying, walking around New York City and stuff like that and seeing people like, I've always, try to help. I don't want to get into specifics, but I always try to help, give money to people and stuff like that. There used to be one guy I used to give money to. I'd see him every day. And I give him like a couple $dollars every week and he'd be in the same position. It got to the point where we would nod at each other. He was this homeless person. But then I started realizing he never was there like on holidays, or he wasn't there early. He'd be there early in the morning and he'd be there for like 12 hours. And I was like, what's going on? And then he wouldn't be there on weekends and stuff. Like, it was just weird. So then I stopped giving to him specifically, or these other people who you can, or I would get worried also. Sometimes I hate seeing, we're going down a weird rabbit hole, but I hate seeing homeless people stay in New York City with animals.
Yeah.
Because I worry about
somebody by your office that used to have kittens.
Yeah. And now I see in the Diamond District, I see dudes selling, they're, I don't know what you'd call them. They're like, they're from, they're like African immigrant guys, who like don't speak good English, and they're selling like puppies out of the back of the car, and stuff like that. I get weird, like, that shouldn't be happening. But anyway, I get worried about people like the homeless people who have the animals, because I worry about whatever is going on, that maybe there's another issue that they may not, if you give them money, say it might not go to the animal they have there or whatever. So I used to go in and buy something specific for the animal and give to them, so that I know that they couldn't go, I don't know, maybe use it on a vice or something. Because a lot of this stuff now, with the rise of fentanyl, and you get subsidies, you could subsidize your addiction because it's so cheap now. I mean, heroin used to be expensive, but now you could have a habit and stuff like that. So it's hard to balance that out because it's so much around us and all that kind of thing nowadays. But I definitely agree, to the point where, I'm a weirdo who carries bird seed around with me. So I'm feeding the pigeons all the time, and I get everybody getting mad at me, or I get people who praise me. And it's weird now, to the point now, because I've learned so much about pigeons, where they mate for life, they recognize faces. I get pigeons following me because they know my walk and my gait. And they think, so I feel horrible if that day I forget to fill my little bottle of pigeon bird seed, that they all come down, and I'm like, I'm sorry guys, I forgot today. And I'm like, oh, it's a cold day or whatever the hell. And I don't want them to start depending on me, because what if I'm not there or I drop dead, I want them to be able to. So yes, I completely see what you're saying, where you have to,
Yeah. I mean, look, there's always going to be people that act more in need than they are. There used to be a guy I used to see all the time on the subway, and I used to see him, and he would do like a really big, like he had something neurologically wrong with him. I can't really, obviously this is only audio, but he would like jerk his head and talk really weird, and
like a Tourette's, like a tick.
Yeah. And he would collect money, and then you ride the subway long enough, a couple weeks later, like he's asking for money and he doesn't have that.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was,
or one time I went to put money in his thing, and I accidentally, and like just hit the wrong way, and I made him drop the jar or whatever, the container, and like all his change, and it's like, and he didn't pick any of it up. He just like left. He was pissed, and I was like, I guess you didn't need it that much. You know what I mean? There's just like a bunch of change laying on the ground. So like, yeah, you have people that will game the system, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't help we shouldn't help people.
Yeah.
Because there are people that need it.
You certainly get people who give, they get popularized, they give everything a bad name because they're gaming the system or stuff like that. And that's where you get all to these conflicts of there's people who desperately need it. Like all these commercials I see every day about these different funds, cancer research, or, St. Jude's or the Shriners. And I'm like, I would only love to be financially independent just to be able to help out.
Yeah, of course.
Pet organizations or all these different charities and stuff like that, Wounded Warriors or whatever it may be. And it's like, and I see these commercials. I was like, I can't even watch these commercials anymore because there's just so much going on in the world or this or that. So it's just, it gets tough, you know.
And a lot of these places, they rely on, you know, like the government or donations and stuff.
Absolutely.
And so when you have people in a position of authority that are deciding like, hey, you know, this AIDS Foundation, who was started by Paul Michael Glazer's wife, because who's, you know, who directed Running Man, but he's also from Starsky and Hutch, Elizabeth Glazer, she contracted AIDS through a blood transfusion. This was when AIDS was, we were still didn't know a lot about it, and she didn't know she had it, and she ended up passing it on to her unborn child. And so she started the Elizabeth Glazer's Pediatric AIDS Foundation. And to like, somebody decided it was a good idea to like cut their grants and put like children who for no fault of their own are contracted a deadly disease and now can't get the medications for them. I mean, people, they're making decisions, you know, like it's just, it's a crazy world. And so like this is, to bring it back to this, like this idea of like, if you're in a position to help people, you know, George Bailey didn't want this life. He wanted to go to be an explorer, and then he wanted to go to college, and he wanted to come back and design cities. But he was given the opportunity, saw that the people of the town needed someone to run this savings and loan. If he was the only one that could do it, because they were going to close it if he didn't do it, he was going to do it.
Yeah, he wanted to be Robert Moses, and he turned into John Steinbeck.
You know, it's yeah, like, and of course it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the movie. It's like, yeah, like as an adult, you can relate to his character in a way that you really, I don't think you can as a child. But you also see that like his life is rewarding, you know, like he has a wonderful wife, and he's got children. Like, I am not a fan of children, but but I understand that people like them. And so, you know,
Get away from me, kid, you bothered me.
You're filthy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
well, it's certainly, I like the toss. What I've always, it's drawn me to this movie, and I'm a sucker for it every time, even going back from when I was little, the idea of you don't realize how many lives you touch until you get that flip, you get that quantum leap. And this is another thing too, where people forget, I guess, I forget where I heard this. So maybe people are talking about it now, or I thought I came up with it myself, but people have already talked about it, where this is like one of the OG original multiverse movies.
yeah.
You know, where they have all that. That's like a common theme now with, you know, I think a multiverse was developed like in the late 50s. I forget why or for what purpose by somebody, but we see it, of course, now with comic book movies and comic books and all this kind of thing. But there is an element of a multiverse here, almost, you know, like the quantum leap idea. So it always resonated with me that you don't realize, you know, how many lives you touch or whatever until you're put in this. Well, I don't think anyone really can, or if there's a way to do that, a situation where if you never existed, what would the life be like? And his town is completely different. You know, he's completely, and that's one of my favorite scenes of
the town.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was looking at like some of the reviews, like there's a mag or an outlet called Salon. And you know, they lean far left, and you know, they were opining about like, well, basically when he leaves the idyllic world of the Capra world and goes to this other world, that's the real world, the Pottersville. Like, you know, I like Pottersville, and like, you know, and it's funny when they go back to Nick's, which was Martini's, the first thing you see is like the black guy playing like the nice jazz blues piano. You know, back then it's like it's the stride piano, and it's all smoky, and it's, you know, and what's her face is getting arrested and put in the paddy wagon and all the, you know, it's like, that's like normal, that's like Times Square.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, you just don't realize how many lives you touch if you weren't to exist. You know, if you didn't have your friend introduce them to the girl or the guy that they married, or, you know, all these different ways, or your parents didn't have you, or whatever the heck. So in the scene that probably my favorite scene of the whole movie is that little short exchange when they go to the cemetery. And it gets really eerie. It almost gets like a Christmas Carol where you have this like ominous music come over, and he goes looking for his development, but the cemetery's there. So I don't know if that means it's like a proto poltergeist. Did they build his development on the cemetery and they moved the graves?
There is a mention when the guy goes to Potter's office. And
he's like the site surveyor.
And they're skin off my back, and he's showing him like, this is what's happening.
I used to go duck hunting over here.
Yeah, he does mention a cemetery during that rant, but I didn't understand like where.
I hope Jimmy didn't just move the headstones and not the graves.
It's the original multiverse. It's also the original Poltergeist.
Can you imagine then?
Martini's family, the goat and the children are suffering from a poltergeist.
They're like with Carol Ann and stuff, and then you realize if you reverse roles, what's his name from Coach? His boss from his name escapes now, from Jaws. He's George Bailey. He's like, I had the best of intentions. I built this development to help people. Don't you understand? I want to help the common man out, but I thought it'd be too expensive. We're not making money off this deal. We didn't move the bodies. We only moved the gray or the tombstones. But one of my favorite scenes of the whole movie is when it gets ominous and he goes there and he's looking at the graves, and he finds his brother's grave, and he's like, Jimmy Stewart's like, he saved all those guys on the transport, and Clarence is like, no, all those transport people died because your brother wasn't there to save him because you weren't able to save Harry. Yeah. And it's just it's so touching at that. He's like, and then I think he even says, because remember, if we go back, I used to always think the title is in all the movies. Yeah. He says to him at the grave, he's like, you really didn't realize you truly had a wonderful life, And that always touched me. And then that's where he's like, where's Mary? He's like, give me the. And then that's when I think they gave some makeup to Donna Reed to make her. She didn't want to grow up to be an old maid, she said to him at the beginning of the movie. But then it's, she's an old maid now. She works at the library and she never married. And she's just like this, little introvert who's wearing glasses.
And the sidewalk.
Would you say?
He assaults her on the street.
Yeah, he just starts yelling at her, and then freaking Ward Bond just starts. He's like, "Everybody, clear back!" And he just unloads his revolver at him, and he knocks out some of the Potterville signs. That's how you used to do it back then. Guy starts running, you're gonna shoot him. There's nothing wrong. You run him down, you shoot him. That's how you stop them back then.
I mean, the score is worth noting. Dmitri Tiomkin is considered one of the great composers of all time. When I interviewed Carpenter, and I was like, why did you do your own scores for so long? You obviously had budgets. He's like, okay, I get what you're saying. I did it because I wanted another, creative voice. It was more of a way to make it my own. But I did ask him, like, would you want other composers? He's like, well, if I could have had Dmitri Tiomkin do it, I would have hired Dmitri Tiomkin. The music that he does when we see Pottersville, we're at the cemetery, that's very reminiscent of some of the sounds that were in the sound library that Romero used for Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Are very cool. I mean, because I think we associate those sounds as being old timey, but being from horror movies and sci-fi horror. It was a very cool touch. And I tried to research how he made them, because they sound almost electronic, which is not, even in 46, wouldn't have been out of the realm of possibility. I mean, what year did
Forbidden
Planet come out?
That's like 55, and that's the husband and wife team who did that crazy. But I mean, at that point, you remember, you do have the I'm making the motions with
theremin.
The theremin. Thank you, the theremin. And then there's that great movie, You'll Find Out, which is, I think, a Kate Kaiser movie that has Peter Lorre, Bela Lugosi, and Boris Karloff in it. But it has a really crazy soundtrack and do some crazy stuff in it. It's kind of like one of these that little era of like the Haunted Mansion, where like they get stuck at the mansion at a party because the bridge gets knocked out, so they're stuck at this house and the house is haunted and everybody's there. But they do some insane sequences where they put like vocals on like the throat, and you get like that wow, 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 like so you're getting like that. So I think that movie might be 42 or 43. So you are getting in the 40s that different style, especially when the theremin comes out and you get that really weird that leads to the 50s where that, by the time you get to Forbidden Planet, that's such an esoteric kind of experimental score.
Well, The Day the Earth Stood Still, which was
maybe 54,
Herman?
53. Yeah.
Herman might have done that score, Bernard Herrmann. That's very, that kind of sets the pace for what we then think of sci-fi movies of the 50s with the theremin sound, because Herman uses the theremin a lot in that score. But I couldn't really find out from research how Tiomkin did those sounds. I mean, there was like he used voices with a choral sound and some kind of technique with the harp where you don't pluck the string, but you rub the string. But they're very cool sounds. And they've reminded me a lot of Night of the Living Dead, which there was not a score written for Night of the Living Dead. They used library tracks.
Which is weird because I'm a big fan of that show, The Naked City. That's basically an early Law and Order that takes place, and they shot it all in New York City in the late 50s, early 60s. That has everybody in it. It's again like Law and Order, where all the young actors who became household names in the 60s and 70s and 80s all were like in episodes. That had all that score. So when I'm watching Naked City, you hear all that Night of the Living Dead, and I'm like, where have I heard this before? And it's like, because if they're using the same library that then 10 years later Romero uses, and that's actually what I pulled for when I did that little radio play, the occurrence at Fort Courage, I think it's called. I did in 2022. That is here if people want to check it out. It's in our back catalog. We reposted it here. I used all that music because I figured it's got to be public domain at this point. I used some other music that I don't want to talk about here just in case it is copyrighted, but I don't think anybody would be looking for it. Yeah. But I used a lot of the iconic Night of the Living Dead score where I could, that wasn't too like, like when the lights go out, the the stuff that you won't, maybe the stuff that you end up hearing again on Ren and Stimpy. Because Ren and Stimpy used a lot of that Night of the Living Dead library as well. Suddenly, like with the rubber nipples episode with the horse, when he's like, do you have when he thinks of the idea, like, I don't need any rubber nipples. Do you have any rubber walrus protectors? You hear that, and then the walrus is like, call the police. Best for me, it's the best vignette in all of Ren and Stimpy. So that was used a lot. Yeah. So I don't know because since we're designed to the 60s, late 60s. I've read someplace the Doors when I was really, really heavy in the Doors, that I think Waiting for the Sun or Strange Days supposedly, or maybe is it Morrison Hotel? I forget what album, but supposedly they credit that as the first use of a certain synthesizer. Although I know the Beatles were doing stuff at the time too, with all kinds of stuff. But so point is, you have also, that's the era where Les Paul's doing all that multi-tracking and all that weird stuff. So it's very easy. They could be, you have like Max, Striner, who was around the time, all these iconic people doing soundtracks that they might have been experimenting with different sounds.
Oh yeah, Steiner,
yeah.
So that just kind of stuck out at me, the score. I mean, obviously the score during the movie in general is great, but those eerie tones kind of really stuck out because there's one so unlike the rest of the score, but two like very effective, three very familiar sounds.
Yeah. It gets very Twilight Zone. It gets really dark. As we discussed prior to this podcast, I'm a big fan of A Christmas Carol, and especially like we just brought up the Alistair Sims version, and that has some really dark elements when shit's going down in that. All there no prisons, all there no workhouses, and you get that feel, and there's that ominous, scary feel. And I've always liked that idea. Not to go down that left turn, that like that used to be a tradition, like a ghost story was a traditional like Victorian English thing too, was you write a Christmas ghost story, which is a forgotten kind of subgenre. So for a movie like this to suddenly take a turn and it gets very ominous and scary, very Twilight Zone-y, It's kind of cool in its own way that it gets serious and it gets really heavy, you know. It's very effective.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it just from that moment where he's sitting at the bar and he's talking to God and he's like, I'm not a praying man, but it's just like we shifted to a whole different gear in that moment.
Yeah. And that's when I've been reading recently, or it's also been coming in my Instagram feed for the past couple of months for some reason, before we even talked about doing this movie, is that people are saying that scene is really the scene when some of Jimmy Stewart's PTSD was coming out of, because he kind of lets loose near the end of that where he's kicking the car and he's having the violent outbursts. He's kind of letting himself, because I guess from what I've read at that point, Stewart had the realization after he got discharged that, you know, some of the bombings they were doing at the time were killing, you know, civilians, of course, because when you're carpet bombing all of Europe during World War II, there's going to be casualties and stuff like that. So there was this great guilt. And the movie that came out the same year was The Best Days of Our Lives. Is that the movie that came out the same year as 47 that won the Oscar instead of this? The Best Years of Our Lives. That is specifically about the vets coming home, and that became like the best or highest movie of the decade because it dealt with what the veterans were dealing with when they came back home and trying to acclimate back to society, which is something gets much more explored nowadays and then into the 70s and stuff after Vietnam, where, you know, guys are coming back from Vietnam and getting spit in the face or whatever and being called baby killers or whatever the hell.
Nothing is over.
Yeah, the whole Rambo ending where it's like, you know, you're going to fight a war and it's, you know, because of the armchair, whatever, generals, and then you get back and then the animus is directed at you from the public who were sitting here protesting it. So for that scene when he goes into Martini's and he's trying to calm down and they kind of zoom in on him and I guess he wasn't supposed to, but he just started crying and he's talking to God. That's really, you know, you could tell he's at his breaking point. It works perfectly in the arc of the movie where he's at his wit's end. He doesn't know what to do. And then that's when he gets that final blow where he's literally punched in the face by the school teacher's husband. And then he drives off and it's taking a dark turn. He hits the tree and the guy's like, you know, my grandfather planted this tree. Look what you did to it. What come back, you know, and then he's going to the bridge. And luckily the road wasn't too slippery because that truck didn't, if that truck skidded, it would have ran him right over.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
You know, the ice, you know, anybody who's driven on ice, you know,
the ice.
The ice is going to break.
It's going to break.
And then you get to that scene. And then, you know, it's like the little things for me. Like then at the end of the movie, you know, I'm a religious guy. So like at the end of the movie, when he runs back to the bridge and everyone's after him, the mob or whatever, especially Bert, the cops were going after him. And he's like, you know, please go. Right when he says God, and then everything starts snowing again. Or like when he says to Clarence and Clarence says, okay, you've never been born, and the snow stops, the door gets blown open. And it's a different night almost, like the weather's changed. Like, I love all that. I'm like, oh, and that whole sequence inside the bridge, I don't know what you call that, the watchman's little room with the guy watching, you know, and he falls off the chair. I always loved all that. The guy just being the spectator and he runs away, you know, he's like, I'm an angel. And, you know, or Clarence is like, you know, this is what I was actually, I passed away in. And the guy's like, what the fuck, you know? And then there's a whole theme too, which I never really put together, but there's all the bells theme. And of course, at the end of the movie, they literally say to you, like, you know, teacher says anytime a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. Oh, that's right. But, you know, even to the start of the movie, you see the bells in the Liberty Films logo, and then there's bells throughout the movie, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So and then, you know, freaking Nick, he's like, hey, look, I'm giving out wings. You know, he's like, I love Sheldon Leonard. Oh, he's like, and that's another thing. Why were you gonna call me Nick? Yeah, it's exactly. He's the proto Andrew Dice Clay, Sheldon Leonard. But it's and that scene I find, you know, actually funny because it's like Sheldon Leonard, Nick doesn't know him, but he's like, Jimmy Stewart doesn't know that he doesn't know him, so he's talking like, Nick, it's all right. It's fine. He's like, all right. And he's like, and you know, he's like, that's another thing. Where do you get to call me Nick? You know, I don't know you I don't know you from the other rocks, you know. or the outer ox. And then then that's when Mr. Gower, Mr. Gower, Mr. Gower, and then they kick him out, and he's like, but then he takes a weird tack. He's like, if you know he did 20 for killing a kid, which means if you know him, you're a prison stool too, or whatever, prison bird. So it's like you'd think he wouldn't care that he went to prison in a place of ill repute like that, Yeah. But yeah, it's great. Let's see. Is there anything else big that we should hit on about? Oh, I love also. This is when you read up on it, but I think it's very funny. Because I read it a couple years ago. The scene when Harry is married and they're at the party and Uncle Billy's drunk, and when he's walking off the porch, the portico porch, and he leaves set. I guess a sound guy. I read it accidentally dropped stuff, or he just did it on purpose, made this, and then what's his face? Thomas Mitchell was like, I'm all right. He improv that, and Jimmy Stewart starts laughing, and they kept that in the movie. I thought that was great. And and then I guess the what I read here too is that Capra paid the guy an extra $10, which was like $100 back.
Yeah, he was like afraid he was going to get fired, but he ended up paying.
That's great.
The other kind of bit of improvisation was during the scene you talked about earlier when the banks closed and they all come to kind of collect their money, and he's like, how are you going to get by just for a week? What do you need for a week? And he's like, I'll take $20. And they go to
the woman,
Mrs. Davis, who's played by Ellen Corby, and Capra told her just make up a number, like something that he wouldn't expect. And she's like, can I have $17.50? And
he gives her a kiss.
And he kisses her. That was, Jimmy Stewart was not expecting that answer. That was his reaction to it. There's some,
that's actually lampooned hilariously. There's an episode of The Simpsons when I used to watch The Simpsons regularly back in the day, where he's like, they do a little scene where it's like, he's like, your money's not here. It's in Billy's house or Joe's house. And the bartender's like, he's like, Billy, what the hell do you have your money in my house? And he like knocks him in the face or something like that. What the hell's my money doing in your house? And he like hits him in the face. It's funny.
But I guess because this was Stewart's first film after the war, and he, like you were saying earlier, like he wasn't sure he was going to act anymore, or if he even wanted to. So he hadn't acted in a few years. And so he was, from what I understand, pretty self-conscious for a lot of this movie. But he kept on, from what I heard, that he really was nervous about the scene where he first kisses Donna Reed. And he kept on asking
Who wouldn't?
Capra to postpone it. Like, let's not do it today. Because he was just like, I haven't acted in a while. I don't know if I have it. And so finally Capra's like, look, Jimmy, we're shooting it today. I don't know what to tell you. Like, we're doing it. And so they say that's why Capra had them share the phone. So that they
it's a great device to have them get close because mom's on the extension. I am not.
They didn't want Jimmy Stewart to be able to like back out. So they shot it where they're sharing the phone, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's such a great scene.
He's like smelling her hair.
And,
like, oh yeah.
And the question and the chemistry between them. And they start doing their dialogue, and she's like, he says it's a good deal or whatever. And then
he just like attacks her.
And then he's like, I'm not staying in town. I don't want to ever get married. And then
Mary, I love you.
And then he can't help it. And he kisses her.
And that was all unrehearsed, right? They said that was unrehearsed. And then like the censors kind of cut it. It got a little too heavy.
But it was also like, from what I heard was like, Capra loved it. But then when they called cut, the script girl was like, yeah, but they missed like an entire page of dialogue. And Capra was like, well, with technique like that, who needs dialogue? Just print that shit. But it plays so well. And it's part of that, what you were talking about earlier with Jimmy Stewart. And obviously, if this is true, that they missed a bunch of dialogue, like that he had the ability to be in the moment. And obviously every actor, and there's a million great actors, but there's something about the way he delivered his lines, that he acted in a scene, that even though he had his Jimmy Stewart-ness about him, that scene is just such a beautiful moment, but the two of them are so great in that moment, and they're both beautiful. Like she's beautiful and he's beautiful too, and you really feel it when they finally kiss.
Yeah, they're like a millimeter from each other's faces, and he's like looking at her hair, and he's like, oh, it's really nice. I mean, this is all based off a short story by Philip Van Doren Stern called The Greatest Gift, which is a short story, which is only about 12 or 13 pages long, which I read actually on the train ride over home from work. And the short story is just quick. It's just a guy who's on a bridge who is a banker, and he's kind of fed up with life, and he's thinking about killing himself. And then Clarence shows up, and Clarence on the bridge gives him kind of convinces him not, why you want to take why do you want to take your own life? And the George character is like, how do you know so much about me? I wish I was never born. And then he says, oh, that's a great idea. He snaps his fingers or whatever. And then, he's like, you've never been born. And he gives him, in this short story, he gives him this bag to carry that has brooms in it. And he says, this will help you go around when you start visiting people as an excuse to your traveling salesman. And he goes back and he realizes that his bank is no longer there. It's been closed. There's a want sign. He runs across the street to the realtor who knows him. The realtor doesn't know him and tells him that, oh, Joe Blow stole the money years ago and skipped town, and his brother's now an alcoholic and stuff like that. And then he's like, what the hell? He goes to his mom's house. His mom doesn't recognize him. The dog's barking at him. He goes inside. He gives his mom a broom and says, I'm just a salesman. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just wanted to just size you up. And he realizes internally they don't know who he is. And then he finally goes over he finds where his wife lives, goes to his wife's house. His wife's married. The other guy that was courting her as well, Mary, is also her name. And there's no Mr. Potter in the original story. And the guys are drunk, and the kids kind of are scared of him, and the kids are running wild, and they have the tendencies of the man they married, and she seems sad. So he leaves, runs back to the bridge, and Clarence is there and is like, see, I told you so. And then Clarence lets him have his life back, and he runs back to town. Sees the realtor. The realtor's like, yeah, of course I know you. And then he looks, the bank is there, and he runs home, and he sees his wife's waiting for him. His wife's like, where have you been? He's like, I love you, Merry Christmas. And then when he sits down on the couch, the broom is there that he gave her when he was, in the other reality. And that's kind of like the Mark Twain or the Adventures of Tom Sawyer book that he finds at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So that's the truncated story, and this is something where I guess the author couldn't get it published, so he just said, screw it. He printed 200 copies up, sent them out with his Christmas cards one year, and somehow it got either into the agent's hands of Cary Grant or Cary Grant's hands, and Cary Grant was so interested, he kind of told either his agent or RKO, and they bought the rights for like 10 grand to sell this thing or to make this thing, and then they sat on it for a little while. Cary Grant goes and makes The Bishop's Wife, which is a Christmas movie.
3 different scripts were written for it.
One where he's like a banker or he's a politician, and these different things, and Potter's in it and all these other things. And it's not really, I guess it gets sat on until Capra finds it. And Capra's like, oh, this is perfect. This is what I've always wanted to do.
Yeah. And he ends up buying it from RKO reportedly for $10,000, right? RKO was just so happy to not take a bath on it for $10,000 that they gave it to Capra for the same price that they paid for it. And they gave him the 3 scripts that they had already kind of developed. And then Capra got together with several writers, took stabs at it, including what ends up being credited Francis Goodrich, Albert Hackett, and Capra, and then with additional scenes by Joe Swirling. There are other writers that worked on it that ultimately the Writers Guild didn't think had enough of a contribution that they needed to be credited.
Like Dalton Trumbo and like some weird people who did like light edits to it or whatever you call that.
So basically they went through, nitpicked, cherry picked some of the stuff from the various scripts, and then obviously kept some moments, but basically kind of rewrote it completely on their own and came up with this script. And Capra decided he wanted to call it It's a Wonderful Life, and apparently this was Capra's favorite movie that he ever made.
Yeah, and then at the beginning of it, I think when the angels are talking and you see the stars fluctuating, they make a nod to the original story. Because when they call Clarence over, he says he's about to throw away his the greatest gift, and then that's when Clarence is like, oh, he wants to kill himself or suicide or whatever. So there's a little nod to the original story. So this movie comes out. It's supposed to come out in 47. I think they backdate it to 46 so they can try to get into the Oscars in 47. And supposedly if they kept it in its release date in 47, they would have had a better time, I think the story is, because of there wasn't that much competition. There was only maybe a Miracle on 34th Street that was out that year. That was a Christmas movie. It could have had a better chance at the Oscars, but since it comes out officially in 46, it's going to get against, like I said, The Best Years of Our Lives, which wins everything. Although this is nominated for 5 different Oscars and it wins. It's nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Editing, and it wins, like we said, the Best Technical, whatever that award was for the snow effect. But it doesn't do well, and I think it takes a loss at the cinema. And then, like we said, Capra is kind of like, they're like, I don't know if Capra still has it anymore, and everyone goes their own ways. And then there's a long and laborious story where like RKO folds and it's bought by Universal. Universal takes it's bought by somebody else. And then in the 70s, whoever owns it, there's a clerical error and they forget to renew the copyright. And because of that, in like 74, they forget to renew the copyright. That's really what gets it in.
Right.
The Capra right. They don't renew the Capra right. That's why this movie starts becoming in the zeitgeist of the world, because then it gives, since there's no copyright, like Night of the Living Dead, the same kind of a situation. They start playing this on TV every year, like at Thanksgiving or Christmas time. It's like, I always associate March of the Wooden Soldiers with Thanksgiving and this at Christmas. They play this every year, and that's what kind of gets this thing the cult status that it becomes, because people just see it every year. And then it's surprising to Jimmy Stewart and Capra how it's not surprising because they believed in it and they realized it, but like Capra's like, it's great. It's like he says, it's like your son becoming the president. It's like it's its own thing and it does its own thing, but he's happy about it. But it's like it took that long for it to get the stuff it deserves, the appreciation or the recognition.
It took television.
Yeah,
it took an entire different medium, and the fact that channels who were looking to show cheap content could basically show it for free.
Yeah, and then it gets into the 80s where then where this company, I think it's the Hal Roach company, starts developing, like I alluded to at the beginning of this thing, that they were going to be doing colorized movies. And Capra's initially interested in the 80s. I think he might pass away. I forget when Capra passes away, but like in 84, he's approached to like to be a part of this. And I think they give a teaser reel or something of the movie in color. He's all in and he invests a certain amount of money into it. And then the company realizes, oh, wait a minute, this thing's fucking public domain. We don't need this. We don't need Capra. So they like renege on the deal, give Capra his money back, and they're going to go off without him and without using any of his input to go make money and colorize this thing. So that's when Capra gets on board with everybody at the time who are getting pissed that they're colorizing these movies, like Jimmy Stewart, who's like, this movie's supposed to be in black and white. Now it looks like an Easter egg. Yeah. And there's this big backlash at the time of everyone was worried they were going to do this to all the classics. Every classic was going to be colorized. And then the problem ends up being, though, kind of the reason why I regurgitated all this is because the whole time, the original story by Philip Van Dorn Stern is copyrighted the whole time. And it's renewed in 71, his copyright. So the original short story is still copyrighted. So he starts fighting people in court saying, hey, even though the movie's public domain, I own the rights to the original story and it's being used. So there's a battle there and there's settlements. So it takes until like the 90s before NBC finally gets the official copyright or the exclusive rights to start airing it. And then they start airing it every year. And then they start letting their subsidiary, which I guess is TNT, to air it, and then it starts airing officially. And then during all that time, you had all these kind of like VHS editions coming out and DVD editions coming out by all these different companies, much like, again, Night of the Living Dead. You'd have all these things coming out.
Premiered December 20th, 1946 at the Globe Theater, which at the time, it's not the Globe Theater anymore. Theater's still there, but it's called something else now. But it's on 46th Street and set just off of 7th Avenue. So it's very close to, just blocks away from where I live and blocks away from where you work is where it
A block
premiered.
away from where I work. Yeah, 46th and 7th there. 46th and 7th. It's still there, the theater?
I think so. I mean, it's a Broadway theater now.
Okay, because I know there was one on 47th and 6th where Spartacus premiered, and they tore that thing down. And it was sad because they turned it into a restaurant. And then when you'd go in, you'd look at the ceiling, and it was this elaborate theater that they had gutted. And they turned into, like, I forget what steakhouse it was before they just hazed the whole building and they put something up.
I mean, I think it's still there. I could be wrong.
It was the old Columbia building. And then they knocked it down and put something else up. But Sparta, I was like, I remember eating in there one time, and I'm like, it was on the same block where I work. I was like, this is where Spartacus premiered. And now we're eating, like, freaking in some, I don't know what it was. It was like a TGA Fridays or, some Bennigan's or some sort of place. But so then they finally get the copyright settled in 2000s, and then that's when you get all these official releases and stuff. And then it becomes this weird thing where streaming, when we were talking about trying to watch this movie, where there's like different versions of it. I don't clearly understand why, but there is if you go try to stream this movie right now, if you don't have a DVD or Blu-ray copy of it, there's the black and white version, excuse me, is 10 minutes or 12 minutes shorter than the original theatrical cut. But which is like 118 minutes, the shortened version. But when you try to find the original 131 minute, 2 hour and 10 minute version, it's color. And it's the new like 2007 color version of it. So I don't know why you got to go down a rabbit hole to find the 4K original black and white version to watch the original, unless you watch it on NBC or something, the unedited version. But I never knew there was a discrepancy where there was another shorter cut. Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know what one of these movies that has a shorter cut. You don't realize why it has a shorter cut.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like one of the things that gets cut out from what I could see or read is him crashing the car into the tree, which I guess maybe someone could cut out because he's drunk driving. I also saw that they cut out like the shot of like that it said Pottersville, and I don't know why they would cut that out.
Yeah. And that's something too, where it's like, people may know, like when a potter's field, that's all very like, meta, where like, or whatever you call it, cause potter's fields are usually where they bury the paupers or the people the bodies aren't claimed. They're in cemeteries. They're called potter's fields. And then I think Ernie in the Pottersville version, says he lives in a potter's field, that's where his like dilapidated houses that he's renting from Potter lives in. So, I don't know why they made all these weird cuts and stuff, but if you go try to watch it after listening to this cast and you go see that there's the 119, just under 2 hours version, don't watch that. Yeah. If you can only find it, you might have to watch the darn colorized version from 2007.
It very well could just be that, this happens all the time with TV shows that are made in other countries, that it could just be that they wanted to have a version that they could air in just 2 hours on television at one point instead of 2.5 hours or 3 hours or whatever. So they might have made cuts just to fit a time schedule on television with commercials. And then that version is the version that went forward, who knows? It could have just be something stupid like that and not for any, real logistical reason other than just to cut time.
And I also read too that if you try to stream it on Plex, which is this thing people stream on nowadays, this darn fangled technology, that actually it's much like, say, a 21 Jump Street, where they actually, for some reason, have a new soundtrack laid in because they couldn't afford there's some sort of legality with the music rights or something. So there's new music in that version, which I don't understand if you try to watch it on Plex.
Which I don't even know how they would do, because it's not like they had I doubt there's masters that exist with, isolated tracks.
The nitrate.
I mean, that's why a lot of there's big business, not big business, but there's people who love, there's not a lot of money to be made, but there's people that love the old film scores, guys that I know, who I've interviewed, some of which I've interviewed for the movie, who they go and one of the most recent ones is they did a CD of the music from Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And the reason why they have to do these rescores for a lot of these movies is because they go and they listen to the movie and they, orchestrate everything and they re-record it because there's no the masters don't exist anymore. So they can't really separate the music from the movie to release it. So that's why I think it's crazy. I don't know how obviously it happens in some cases because somebody released the original recordings of for Bride of Frankenstein score. So, obviously sometimes they can find them, but that's why the rescores happen. It's even why a lot of the rescores happen in the 70s, why they would re-record tracks for the Bullet soundtrack.
I was just about to bring that up. Every time I bought a Bullet soundtrack, it wasn't the original version. I think you're the one who gave me a copy. They, I don't know, finally for some reason opened the vault and released the original, or they didn't have access to it. I don't know what the story was there. I forget. But for all these years, when you get the soundtrack, it was re-recorded. And that happened with a bunch of, maybe even the Dirty Harry soundtrack. I forget which ones. But they were, until, I don't know, they found them or they cleaned them up or if they weren't available. I understand it with the older movies. If you're looking for Frankenstein or some whatever the heck, or White Heat, but it's I don't know, for movies that are more recent, like about Bullet from the late 60s, it's why wouldn't you have it unless there was a fire or some sort?
And they would often they were it was re-recorded by Lalo Schifrin.
Yeah. It's Lalo just doing a different, but it doesn't, but when you listen to it, they don't sound right. I don't know how you explain. Even though they're doing it note for note, it just doesn't sound like the original one, which is weird.
The other thing I wanted to point out of this movie, because I don't know, I was a little shocked by it, is I think it's the scene where George Bailey has lost the $8,000, which we never actually explained in this podcast. We're going to trust that you've seen the movie or you're going to see the movie. But he goes to Potter and he wants Potter to lend him the money. And Potter's like, why should I help you? Go ask those people that you love so much, those garlic eaters that you love so much to help you. And I was like, well, garlic eaters? Is he talking about martini?
Well, I think he's disparaging migrants at the time, Italians and stuff like that, because back then Irish, Italian were kind of the underclass. They were almost,
it was a little shocking.
Because he's almost a WASP at the time, the Anglo-Saxon kind of person, where a lot of the immigrants of the era were, like the African American. People forget they were looked at as, in that, kind of I don't know what you call it, that grouping or something like that. So maybe that's what he's kind of saying there.
Clearly it's a derogatory prejudice term.
Yeah, you can infer whoever you want they think they're talking about. But
I assume it's Italians, but there's a lot of cuisines that a lot of ethnicities that use garlic.
It's surprising also that the Hays Code is in effect at the time as well. And it gets by the Hays Code that Potter's never, according to the Hays Code, at the end of a movie, I think it was the bad guy was supposed to be punished for whatever he did, or he's supposed to have some sort of redemption and realize the fault in his ways. Yeah. And you never get a comeuppance for Potter. Potter kind of gets away with it.
He steals the money.
Yeah. And claims complete ignorance to the part where, like you just said, when George Bailey's going to ask him for the money, he's like, go fuck your mother. He's like, who cares? And that leads me to one of the greatest things I've ever seen, where there's an episode of Saturday Night Live. I want to say it's in the 80s when William Shatner was on, maybe promoting TJ Hooker. And Shatner intros it where he's like, you know, you're going to have a special treat tonight. We've actually found the original ending to It's a Wonderful Life, and we're going to premiere it for the first time here ever. So, ladies and gentlemen, please watch. And it cuts to it's the black and white version. It's the climax scene. You have Dana Carvey playing George Bailey. You have what's her name? Oh my God, what's her? Jan Hooks playing Mary. You got Phil Hartman playing Uncle Billy, and then you have Dennis Miller playing his brother. And you know, it's the end of the movie. They're all like happy, like Merry Christmas, the bells, and all that. And then suddenly Phil Hartman comes in as Uncle Billy. He's like, I remember what I did with the money. I left it with Mr. Potter. And then Dana Carvey's like, well, let's go get that freaking bastard. And they have this lynch mob, and they go to Mr. Potter's office, and it's John Lovitz, and John Lovitz is Mr. Potter. They break in, and they're like, you stole the money, blah, blah, blah. We're going to take a piece out of you. And then like, they go to try to rough him up, and they push him out of the wheelchair. And he falls and he gets up, and Dana Carvey's like, oh, he's alive. He's not even a cripple. And then like John Lovett's like, I can explain. And then they just beat the crap out of him. And that's the ending of the movie. Mr. Potter gets his comeuppance at the end of it. It's one of the funniest scenes. I
kind of remember that.
Everyone should go YouTube that sketch, because it's one of the most brilliant Saturday Night Live sketches ever, aside from the scene, the sketch of Johnny Carson retiring, and they're doing the Remember the Days thing, and then it cuts to just this random thing of Johnny Carson from the 70s. Dana Carvey is Johnny Carson, and it cuts to, he's like, you know, we used to have some wild and crazy stuff here. And he goes, let's show one of those clips. And it just shows this clip from the 70s of him dressed as Johnny Carson in the 70s. Phil Hartman is Burt Reynolds laughing, and then Dom DeLuise, played by Chris Farley, comes up and pies them in the crotch, and they're all starting laughing. And then Chris Farley's doing the Dom DeLuise, and then he's in khakis. He starts peeing himself because he's laughing so hard. And then that's it. There's no context, and they just fade back, and it cuts to like, you know, Dana Carvey looking now like the 90s Johnny Carson with the short haircut. He's like, yeah, wild and crazy stuff, you know. It's brilliant.
And
but,
continue with the Hays Code. Apparently the script had issues that the Hays Code, MPA production code, had issues with. They had to cut the phrase nuts to you and the words impotent, dang, lousy, and jerk from the script. But they did get by on what you said, which is that Potter never got his comeuppance in the movie.
And evidently, for a couple years when it re-aired on television in the 50s and 60s, I want to say, that they used another take for him saying, you let my daughter come home half naked, to the teacher on the phone. They dubbed it something else in, where he's like, you had her come home half dressed. I forget what they had him say, but evidently that was a cut they were running for a while till they, you know, because there's some things in here you're like, wow, they got away with, you know, what he's saying and all this. Like that scene when Donna Reed's like, he's making violent love to me, Mom. That sounds kind of risque.
Yeah,
like, you know, but they kept that in. I would like to mention too that, you know, radio fans like myself, if you go listen, they did 3 different productions of this. I think CBS did a radio production. Lux Radio did a radio production. There's a third one. The Lux one comes out in 47, right around when they're trying to show this thing around. And then the other ones come out maybe the same year or the year later, but they've truncated it into an hour version. And in all 3 airings, they have Donna Reed and Jimmy Stewart reprise their roles, which is really cool to hear, the truncated version of them doing it on radio. And then in the late 90s, evidently PBS did, sometimes if you catch PBS, they'll have these weird things I've never seen before. Well, they'll do like, they have recordings of people doing stage reads, like it's their old radio play. And I've caught a couple of these that are really cool. And they did one in the late 90s where it's Bill Pullman as George Bailey. You have Penelope Ann Miller as Mary. You have Nathan Lane maybe as Uncle Billy. And I forget who plays Mr. Potter. But evidently that's supposed to be really cool. And I've never seen that, so I want to try to search that out. And then there's a 1977 TV movie version where they inverse the genders a little ahead of their time there. And they have like Mary Bailey or somebody, and I forget who plays her, but Clarence is a female and is played by Cloris Leachman, and she wins or is nominated for a Golden Globe for her, or no, an Emmy. She's nominated for an Emmy for that, and that's only aired like 2 or 3 times. It's never aired again. It's not available. So I wonder if that's on YouTube. Somebody taped it that night on VHS. You can find that, which would be cool.
I remember when I saw Happy Death Day, horror movie came out, I don't know, while now it's probably been almost a decade. Anyway, I love that movie. And then that guy made Freaky, was Chris Landon, Michael Landon's son, made those movies. And Freaky was like Freaky Friday as a horror movie. I was like, these gimmicky, like, I love this idea of taking like this gimmick that's not horror and making a horror movie version of it. And I was like, I wonder if there's a way to make It's a Wonderful Life a horror movie.
Well, I think we just came up with it with the Poltergeist.
But Chris Landon produced, he didn't direct. There was a movie that came out a few years ago called It's a Wonderful Knife.
Oh.
That unfortunately is not that good. But somebody did attempt to make a slasher movie version of It's a Wonderful Life. So you could add that to your Christmas viewing, even though this podcast is going to come out like after Christmas.
Yeah, and we might be able to get it out before.
We're going to try to get it in just on
right on Christmas Eve. Honorable mentions that, as we were talking about a minute ago with all the crazy rights issues in the 90s, this was released on CD-ROM in the 90s, in 1993, for Windows PC, Windows 3.1, and it was like before DVDs, and it was the first officially released movie, and they had some sort of thing here where they were able to fit the movie onto like a CD at the time, and then it was interactive, so you could watch it on your computer and you can follow along with the script. And they say it's kind of like foreshadowed by like 2 or 3 years the advent of the DVD, which I think is pretty cool. And then lastly, there is as everyone knows, I'm a huge Muppets fan. They did a 2002 kind of semi remake of this movie, retelling with Kermit, and I'm not a big fan of that. It's called, what is it called? A Very Muppet Christmas, maybe? Or it's A Very Merry Muppet Christmas, which was on NBC in 2002. It has its moments. It's funny in some aspects. Like there's a scene when Kermit, when he gets the idea, or when he gets his wish of not being alive, he goes in and he realizes that I think it's that the Muppet Show theater has been turned into a nightclub. So it's 2002. So when he walks in, it's like this club, like where they're playing like techno music and there's all glow sticks, and he sees Sam Eagle, who's like playing with the glow sticks and all this stuff, and like Kermit's all freaked out by it. So there are parts of it that are nice, but in my personal and humble opinion, it does not pale to the greatness of the Very Merry of the Muppet Family Christmas from 1987. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people hold in high regard the Muppet Christmas Carol. I don't. I like the Alistair Sims one better. But my favorite Muppet Christmas, aside from Emmett Otter and Sesame Street, is, of course, the Muppet Family Christmas from 87.
Which we covered on the show, didn't we?
Yeah, we might have did it last year or the year before. At some point we did it. We've mentioned the Sesame Street one before. We did Emmett Otter, and at some point, and then we did, I think, the Family Christmas as like a short episode. Maybe we did like as a bonus or something like that. So, and then Jimmy Stewart goes on to have an amazing career. All these people, Donna Reed too. And, like I said, Ward Bond goes on. What's his face? Lionel Barrymore. He gets the role because which I want to go listen to. Evidently he would every year, maybe with Orson Welles, he would do, Orson Welles played Mr. Potter in the TV movie with Cloris Leachman. So they didn't gender change him. They just kept him as a mean old man. They had Orson Welles play Mr. Potter, which sounds pretty cool. But I guess in the Mercury Theater era days, Orson Welles every year would do a Christmas Carol kind of, maybe not for the Mercury Theater, but he would have Lionel Barrymore play Ebenezer, and that kind of they were thinking of like Vincent Price or I forget who they had in the category, the Raymond Massey, the aforementioned from Arsenic and Old Lace. But they settled on Lionel Barrymore, who I thought was a perfect casting. Everybody in this movie, I think, is great. Like I said, everybody down to the bit players, Martini and Sheldon Leonard and everybody, I think, are great. Even the kids, Zuzu, and I think she may still be alive. One of the kids are the only kid because they've made there's a museum somewhere in New York, upstate, that kind of says that they, because Capra had relatives upstate in a town, and that kind of got him the idea to set it in upstate New York in Westchester or something, where the author of the original story says I had it set in New Jersey, in some town in New Jersey. But then scholars go and say, well, Capra never mentioned this, but some town in upstate New York has a museum that the actress, I think, who played Zuzu, came in and cut the ribbon to open it up, and you can go visit. And then like every second week in December, they have they play the movie, and they have this little It's a Wonderful Life festival in this town.
Yeah. It's like Seneca Falls or
something like
something
that.
Falls.
Yeah, I think you're right. Seneca Falls.
Something like that.
And and then the last, I guess, to close it out on is the old Bert and Ernie thing. I've always was under the impression that that it couldn't have been a coincidence that Bert the cop, Ernie the cab driver, and then you have the Muppets Bert and Ernie. But in doing the research, they're saying that they talked to John Stone, who was one of the original producers on Sesame Street, and Jerry. I never get his last name right. I think the voice of Gonzo. They say that Henson never mentioned to anybody that he was referencing It's a Wonderful Life, although he clearly liked It's a Wonderful Life. But I don't know. But there is evidently a moment in some Muppet Christmas episode where Bert and Ernie are walking by the set and they see It's a Wonderful Life on, and Bert and Ernie are on the movie, and then they walk by and they're like, hey, look, they make they break the fourth wall or something about it or something. So yeah. Anything else you got?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything that I had anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff here, but I mean, that's really, I think that's all she wrote for the most part.
Got the
yeah,
got the sun peeking up.
Yeah, sun's coming up. We're out of eggnog. Our voices are getting hoarse. So this closes out, I guess, the 2025 season. We've been sparse. We've been busy. We've been doing things. Blake put a whole new book out, under everyone's nose. So we've been busy, and we haven't been putting out as much as we usually do. So, we wanted to throw this one out before the end of the year just to close out the epic 2025 mini season. It's like a British series, we got only like 5 or 6 episodes.
And then we did the Christmas episode.
And then we did the Christmas special at the end. We ended it with the anniversary episode, Young Sherlock Holmes, and then we did the Christmas episode to surprise everybody. So, Blake, what have you been up to over there?
I've been looking for work, trying to make a movie, and I slipped out unfortunately the print I had issues with the print version, but I put out a little book. I had thoughts about interviewing. I've obviously interviewed many creative people spanning from Bruce Campbell to, a million film music composers, some rock and blues guitar legends. And, I throughout the years talking about It's a Wonderful Life, not knowing the impact you've had on people. We've heard from people that they started a podcast because they heard our podcast. I've had people say they started interviewing composers because they read my books and didn't realize that, hey, you can interview film music composers. So I decided to put down kind of like some of my thoughts about the art of interviewing. It's called Interviewing, a pocket guide to conversations for podcasting, print, and video, something to that effect. I can't even remember but right now it's an ebook on Amazon. You can just look up J. Blake Fischera and find it, or go to my other books and then click on my name. It's a short little thing. That's why I called it a pocket guide. The print version, when I finally get that worked out, there was some issues with it printing. I'm hoping to get the printing version out at some point soon. I sized it, the print version, at like the dimensions of a novelization. And it's not incredibly long, but basically through the years of interviewing, I kind of just jot down some tips and some tricks, some shortcuts, how I've had success getting interviews with people, reaching out to people to interview them, how I do the process of researching and getting the questions, and how that part of actually interviewing. So it's like I go through every process of how I go through doing interviews, kind of from inception of who I choose, why I choose them, why I decide to do a project, to doing the interview and then editing the interview for either print, audio, or video. Because obviously I've done it for print, I've done it for podcasts, and I've done it for video. So basically I just wanted to give kind of like a little how-to guide of how I do it. Everybody will find their own way, but hopefully, and from what I've heard from the few people I already know, because it's a quick read that I've read it, they seem to get something out of it. So that's cool. And that's the newest project. That's on Amazon as an ebook, coming to print hopefully soon. Of course, the other book, Scored to Death, Conversations with some of Horace Gray's composers, Scored to Death 2, More Conversations with some of Horace Gray's composers, is out in ebook and paperback. I still have plenty of copies of the album, Scored to Death, Musique de Horror. Fantastic compilation album if you're into film music, electronic music, instrumental music. Amazing cast of musicians and composers covered horror movie themes out of the goodness of their heart to help me make a movie. All proceeds go towards the completion of the Scored to Death documentary, which I've been working on now for longer than I would have liked. It's behind schedule, but we're still doing it. I went to California in November and did some reshoots and stuff. So we're still plugging away on that. You can find the books on Amazon, other book retailers. The album is available at scoredtodeath.bandcamp.com. It might be a little too late, but everything obviously makes for a great Christmas gift, or just a little something for yourself.
Little New Year's gift too.
What about you, Dion? What do you got going on?
I got my first book, Blood in the Streets, which is available on Amazon on ebook, audiobook, and paperback. I have my second book, Morris P.I., The Men from Ice House 4, also available on Amazon and book retailers in ebook, audiobook, and paperback. And I've been working on the third one, but I just been bogged down with the day job. I've been very busy, so I'm kind of in the point of George Bailey walking towards the bridge at this point. So I got to get back on track before I throw myself into the river and get the third book done that I've been writing. And at some point I'll do that and have new material coming out. But at the moment, that's what I've been doing. And, you can find me and us on our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook handles and stuff like that. If you want to reach out to us and talk to us or talk to me or talk to you and, conversate with us about things. And that's really all I've got going on at the moment. And of course, we have Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers, and we've made the transition purely to Spotify at the moment. We've kind of good-nighted at the moment the old school site, which I think we brought up in Young Sherlock Holmes. We haven't put a announcement up on the site yet, but if you're just getting this where you get your podcasts, you're getting the new ones anyway. I don't know if anybody was checking the old mothership site, which we had going for a while. So if anybody was still going to the site to get the casts and it hasn't updated from like Midnight Run, that's the reason why. We've just gone over exclusively to like the podcast streaming platforms and stopped posting through a WordPress kind of a system. Yeah,
we were running the technical difficulties. We started so we've been doing the show so long that the technology in which we were posting them all these years had kind of become obsolete. And we were running into a lot of issues with getting episodes up and then them not showing up on all the players, or even though they would show up, you couldn't hit, a lot of them wouldn't play on the different websites. So we kind of migrated everything over to Spotify right now. And so all the episodes, as far as we know, all the episodes are up except for Star Wars, because Spotify likes to flag things for copyright infringement. So we're going to make some tweaks to the Star Wars episode somewhat soon, and then repost that. And then we think every episode will be up from the back catalog. We're also going to be in 2026 uploading the back catalog to YouTube. I know we've talked about YouTube for a long time. Dion and I have been talking about it privately, but I'm sure it's probably come up on the show. But we're finally going to take the plunge. Obviously, we don't have video for the show, but especially, 11 years worth of episodes.
Yeah, because we've been doing it this long. We never thought of starting it doing video, but we've been trying to I've been a huge proponent to get this sucker on YouTube. Let's make some of those nickels.
So that's going to be the project for 2026 is we're going to start putting up. It's going to be a long thing. We have over 200 episodes, so it's going to take a while, but we're going to slowly be putting up the episodes, the back catalog, and any new episodes that come up on YouTube. So you can check it out there. And when that starts to happen, and then maybe as those come up and you're on YouTube, you'll see them and it'll remind you of an episode, and you'll be like, oh, I haven't listened to that episode in a long time, because they're not going to be going up in order. They're going to be going up a little bit sporadically. So that's the plan for that. And then we'll see for 2026. I know every year we get to the Christmas episode and Dion's like, we're going to do all this stuff. And I'm always the one that's like, hey, let's pump the brakes. Let's see. But
it's the eggnog.
We're going to try to no promises, but we're going to try to actually ramp up the production a little more for 2026. And as of right now, we're planning on, I'm not going to say it's a change in format, but I think we're going to be a little looser with some of the movies in terms of the type of movies that we cover. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with 2026. But I think we're both kind of excited about maybe doing some stuff for 2026. And by taking a little bit of a new approach, I think we are hoping that it can get us more interested and excited to do the show by, just changing things up a little bit and get us kind of out of a little bit of the rut that we've been in. And obviously we've been busy, but we were busy when we were doing it all the time too. So I think we just got old and tired. And I think we're hoping that we can kind of breathe some more life into the show, and we'll see if we're able to do that. But I think we have.
Hopefully YouTube will help us attract maybe some new listeners or get some new attention and build us up a little bit to start helping us then, put new material and content out by maybe, expanding the audience that maybe we once had. And, since we were putting out stuff sporadically, maybe we lost some listeners and stuff. We have, of course, the OGs who've listened to us since day one, but we want to try to maybe get back more people or get back to the level we were at, or even get new people to come listen to it. And we think these are good ways of doing that.
So it's potentially exciting. If you enjoy the show, we're hoping that
the password is potentially.
We're hoping to. We'll see. We're going to try. We've been brainstorming some ideas, and separately been thinking of some movies we'd like to cover. And I don't know. I hope 2026 is going to be our year, Dion. We're going to. Yeah, it's going to be our year. Going to be nominated for a Golden Globe next year for Best Podcast.
Yeah, we get a Rondo Hatton Award or a Razzie. Either one. We don't know. So, well, we hope you have a good holiday season. We hope everyone's okay. We hope you enjoy yourself. You take some time out of this crazy world to just slow down and enjoy yourselves and hang out with whatever you do with your friends and family or whatever. And you enjoy yourself, listen to us. And we'll be seeing you in the next year. And as the great Hank Williams used to say, God willing, the creeks don't rise. We'll be seeing you really soon. So Merry Christmas.
Later.
Which, is another type.
Babe! Yeah. There he goes. He's tearing out. I don't know if you guys can hear this.
Oh, okay. It's all right. All right, it's dead. Oh, here he comes. Okay. Good boy. Let's pick it up. Oh, well, wait. Do you want to wait? You hear what it is? It's the diesel engine out there. He hates diesel engines. Anytime it's like he gets so mad. Like, I don't know. You know when you get packages and the FedEx guy does beep?
Yeah.
He hears that on the 5th floor. He goes insane because he knows they're in the building.
I used to have a...
Good boy, babe. Who's a good boy? Babe's a good boy. You saw him off. Good boy.